The Aeldari Empire stood as the galaxy's undisputed master for millions of years, a civilization so advanced that their technology appeared as pure magic to lesser species. At its zenith, roughly 65 million years ago, the Empire stretched across countless star systems, encompassing worlds that defied natural law through psychic manipulation and technological mastery. The Aeldari had transcended the crude limitations of physical existence, their cities floating in impossible geometries above planets whose very climates they had reshaped according to aesthetic whim. Their mastery of the webway represented perhaps their greatest achievement. This labyrinthine network of tunnels through the warp connected every major Aeldari world, allowing instantaneous travel across galactic distances without the perils of direct warp exposure. The webway's construction had taken millennia, carved through the immaterium by the combined psychic might of the Aeldari race under the guidance of their gods. Great webway gates, towering structures of wraithbone and crystallized psychic energy, served as entry points on countless worlds, their surfaces rippling with otherworldly light as travelers passed through dimensional barriers. The Aeldari themselves had evolved beyond the crude biological forms of their ancestors. Their lifespans stretched across millennia, their psychic abilities allowing them to perceive and manipulate reality in ways that would drive lesser minds to madness. They stood tall and graceful, their features sharp and alien, with eyes that held the weight of centuries and minds that could process information at superhuman speeds. Their technology had merged seamlessly with their psychic abilities, creating devices that responded to thought and emotion rather than crude mechanical manipulation. On the paradise worlds of the Empire, Aeldari society had stratified into castes based on artistic and intellectual pursuits. The aspect warriors, elite military specialists, maintained their skills through ritualized combat that was as much performance art as warfare. The Bonesingers shaped wraithbone with their psychic abilities, creating structures that grew like living things yet possessed the durability of the finest metals. The Farseers, most gifted of the Psychers, gazed into the twisting currents of fate itself, their prophecies guiding the Empire's decisions across the centuries. Yet this very perfection contained the seeds of destruction. With all material needs satisfied and all enemies conquered, the Aeldari turned inward, pursuing ever more elaborate forms of entertainment and sensation. What began as artistic expression gradually transformed into something darker. The pursuit of perfect experiences became an obsession with intensity, regardless of the cost. Pain and pleasure became interchangeable currencies in a society that had forgotten the meaning of restraint. The transformation occurred gradually, spanning thousands of years. On the core worlds, particularly those closest to the galactic center, Aeldari society began to embrace practices that would have horrified their ancestors. Cults of sensation arose, dedicated to exploring every possible experience the universe could offer. Their gatherings, initially small and secretive, grew into massive festivals where the boundaries between reality and nightmare dissolved. The Aeldari's natural psychic abilities amplified these experiences, creating feedback loops of emotion and sensation that rippled through the warp itself. The pleasure cults proliferated across the Empire's heart, their influence spreading like a contagion through the interconnected webway. They built amphitheaters of living bone, where audiences experienced the emotions of performers directly through psychic link. They created drugs that didn't merely affect the body, but rewrote the very structure of consciousness, allowing users to experience multiple contradictory sensations simultaneously. Their artists crafted sculptures that screamed with the voices of the tortured. Their musicians composed symphonies that drove listeners to ecstasy and madness in equal measure. As the cults grew bolder, their practices became increasingly extreme. They began to view other species not as inferior beings to be ignored or occasionally enslaved, but as raw material for their experiments in sensation. Humans, orcs, and other races were captured and subjected to procedures that explored the furthest limits of pain and pleasure. The Aeldari's advanced understanding of neurology and psychology allowed them to keep their subjects conscious and aware throughout experiences that should have killed them instantly. The psychic emanations from these activities began to coalesce in the warp, forming currents of emotion and sensation that grew stronger with each passing century. The Aeldari's collective unconscious, normally a source of stability and wisdom, became polluted with images of excess and corruption. Their dreams filled with visions of impossible pleasures and exquisite torments, visions that many began to pursue in waking life. Not all Aeldari participated in this descent into madness. On the Craftworlds, massive city ships that traveled the void between stars, more conservative elements of society watched the core worlds with growing alarm. The farseers among them cast their sight into the future, seeing glimpses of a catastrophe so terrible that it would shatter the Empire forever. Their visions showed a great darkness rising from the galactic core, a presence of such malevolent hunger that it would devour not just the Aeldari, but threaten the very fabric of reality itself. These prophetic warnings met with dismissal and mockery from the pleasure cults. The core world's inhabitants had become so consumed with their pursuits that they viewed the Craftworld Aeldari as primitive relics, clinging to outdated concepts of restraint and morality. The webway carried not just travelers but ideas, and the corruption spread even to some of the outlying worlds, though it never achieved the complete dominance it held over the Empire's heart. The Farseer's visions grew more urgent and specific as the millennia passed. They saw the birth of something terrible, a god of excess and sensation that would feed on the very emotions the pleasure cults celebrated. This entity would not merely destroy the Aeldari Empire, but would claim the souls of every member of their race, condemning them to an eternity of torment that would make their earthly excesses seem like gentle caresses. The Craftworlds began to prepare for exodus. These massive vessels, each the size of a small moon, had originally served as trading posts and manufacturing centers, traveling between the Empire's worlds to exchange goods and culture. Now they transformed into arcs, their populations swelling as those who heeded the Farseer's warnings abandoned their homeworlds. The Craftworld's infinity circuits, psychic networks that preserved the souls of the dead, were expanded and reinforced to protect their inhabitants from the coming catastrophe. The preparations took centuries, conducted in secret to avoid the attention of the pleasure cults, who had grown increasingly paranoid and violent toward any who questioned their path. Entire populations were evacuated under cover of routine trading missions, their departure disguised as temporary relocations. The Craftworld's Bonesingers worked tirelessly to expand their vessels' capacity, growing new districts and chambers from Wraithbone to house the refugees. As the 30th millennium drew to a close, the psychic emanations from the core worlds reached a crescendo that could be felt across the galaxy. The warp itself began to convulse, reality tearing at the edges as something vast and hungry stirred in the immaterium. The Aeldari gods, ancient entities that had guided the race since its earliest days, felt the approaching doom and began to take desperate measures to preserve themselves and their children. The birth of Slaanesh occurred in a single, catastrophic moment that lasted for subjective millennia. The accumulated psychic energy of the Aeldari's excesses coalesced into a new chaos god, she who thirsts, whose very existence was an affront to the natural order. The moment of birth created a massive tear in reality at the galaxy's heart, a wound in space-time that would become known as the Eye of Terror. The psychic shockwave of Slaanesh's birth consumed the core worlds instantly, their populations dying in moments of ultimate ecstasy and agony as their souls were drawn into the new god's maw. The Aeldari pantheon, caught off guard by the sudden emergence of their antithesis, fought desperately to preserve themselves and their people. Most fell to Slaanesh's hunger, their divine essence consumed by the chaos god's insatiable appetite. Kain, the god of war, was shattered into fragments that scattered across the galaxy, his pieces eventually becoming the avatars that would serve the Craftworlds in the dark times ahead. Isha, the goddess of healing and life, was captured by Nurgle, the chaos god of plague and decay, who claimed her as his prisoner and unwilling consort. Only Segorach, the laughing god, managed to escape Slaanesh's initial feeding frenzy, fleeing into the webway's deepest recesses, where he would gather the survivors who would become the Harlequins. The destruction of the Aeldari pantheon left the surviving members of the race spiritually orphaned, their souls no longer protected by divine intervention from the predations of chaos. The Eye of Terror expanded rapidly, consuming entire star systems as the barrier between reality and the warp collapsed. Worlds that had stood for millions of years simply ceased to exist, their matter and energy absorbed into the roiling chaos of the new warp storm. The webway network, so carefully constructed over the millennia, suffered catastrophic damage as the psychic shockwaves tore through its tunnels, collapsing entire sections and trapping travelers in pocket dimensions where time and space held no meaning. The craftworlds that had heeded the Farseer's warnings found themselves adrift in a galaxy suddenly hostile to their very existence. The psychic beacon that had been their homeworld was gone, replaced by a wound in reality that called to every demon in the warp. Worse, they discovered that Slaanesh's birth had created a fundamental change in their relationship with the Immaterium. Every Aeldari soul now burned like a beacon in the warp, drawing the attention of she who thirsts, who viewed them as rightful property to be claimed and consumed. The survivors faced a choice that would define their species for the next 10,000 years. They could continue as they had, accepting that their souls would eventually be claimed by Slaanesh, or they could find a new way to live that would deny the chaos god her prize. The Craftworld Aeldari chose transformation, abandoning their old identity and embracing a new philosophy that would allow them to survive in a galaxy where their very existence was a form of resistance against chaos. The path system emerged from this necessity, a rigid structure of life stages that would replace the chaotic pursuit of sensation with disciplined self-improvement. Rather than experiencing all emotions simultaneously, the Asuryani, as they now called themselves, would focus on single aspects of existence, mastering them completely before moving to the next. This compartmentalization would prevent the kind of psychic overflow that had doomed their ancestors, while still allowing them to achieve the excellence that was their birthright. The transformation from Aeldari to Asuryani was not merely philosophical but practical. The Craftworlds reorganized their societies around the path system, creating institutions and traditions that would support this new way of life. The aspect shrines, dedicated to specific forms of warfare, became centers of learning where warriors could focus their violent impulses in controlled, ritualized fashion. The path of the Seer allowed those with the strongest psychic gifts to develop their abilities safely, while the path of the artisan channeled creative energies into the production of tools and weapons needed for survival. The massive vessels that became the salvation of the Asuryani had originally served as trading posts and manufacturing centers during the height of the Aeldari Empire. These craftworlds, each the size of a small moon, possessed sophisticated bioengineering that allowed them to function as self-contained ecosystems capable of sustaining millions of inhabitants across the void of space. Their hulls consisted primarily of wraithbone, a psychically responsive material that could be shaped and grown through the mental focus of skilled bonesingers. This organic construction method meant that each craftworld possessed a unique architectural character, its structures flowing in curves and spirals that defied conventional engineering principles while maintaining perfect structural integrity. The craftworld's ability to support life came from their symbiotic relationship with their inhabitants. The Asuryani did not simply live within these vessels, they formed part of their biological systems. Specialized chambers throughout each craftworld housed atmospheric processors that converted waste products into breathable air, while hydroponic gardens provided sustenance through carefully cultivated food sources. The craftworld's environmental systems responded to the psychic emanations of their populations, adjusting temperature, humidity, and even gravitational fields to maintain optimal living conditions across different districts. Each major craftworld developed its own distinct culture and martial traditions following the fall, shaped by the specific circumstances of their exodus and the philosophical interpretations of the path system adopted by their inhabitants. These differences manifested not only in their approaches to warfare and governance, but in their physical appearance and internal organization. Ulthwé, positioned closest to the Eye of Terror, developed into a craftworld dominated by seers and those who walked the path of the witch. The constant proximity to the warp storm created by Slaanesh's birth meant that Ulthwé's population possessed unusually strong psychic abilities, with a higher percentage of individuals capable of becoming farseers than any other craftworld. The architecture of Ulthwé reflected this psychic focus, with crystalline spires that amplified and channeled psychic energy throughout the vessel. These towers, grown from a specialized form of wraithbone infused with psychically active minerals, created a network that allowed the Craftworld Seers to maintain constant vigilance against the threats emerging from the Eye of Terror. The Seer Council of Ulthwé wielded more direct political power than their counterparts on other Craftworlds, their prophetic abilities considered essential for the survival of a population living in such proximity to chaos. The Craftworld's military forces reflected this emphasis on psychic warfare, with guardian squads often led by warlocks who could coordinate their movements through telepathic links. Ulthwé's aspect warriors showed particular expertise in the arts of the striking scorpions and dark reapers, both aspects that required the kind of patience and foresight that came naturally to a population trained in psychic disciplines. Aeldari pursued a different path, embracing the most rigid interpretation of the path system. The Craftworld's inhabitants followed the various paths with an almost obsessive dedication, viewing any deviation from prescribed behavior as a dangerous step toward the excesses that had doomed their ancestors. This philosophical stance created a society where individual expression was subordinated to collective discipline, resulting in military forces renowned for their precision and coordination. Aeldari's architecture emphasized clean lines and geometric patterns, its districts organized according to strict hierarchical principles that reflected the Craftworld's social structure. The Rangers of Aeldari became legendary throughout the galaxy for their skill in reconnaissance and long-range warfare. These individuals, having completed multiple paths and chosen to exile themselves from Craftworld society, served as the eyes and ears of their people across distant worlds. Their self-imposed isolation allowed them to operate in environments where other Asuryani would be overwhelmed by psychic interference, gathering intelligence on threats to the Craftworld, while maintaining the emotional distance necessary to avoid falling into the trap of sensation-seeking that had destroyed their ancestors. Biel-Tan represented the most militant interpretation of Asuryani philosophy, its population dedicated to the restoration of the ancient Aeldari dominion over the galaxy. The Craftworld's inhabitants viewed themselves as the rightful heirs to their ancestors' empire, seeing the younger races as usurpers who had claimed territory that belonged to the Aeldari by right of prior occupation. This aggressive stance shaped every aspect of Biel-Tan's culture, from its emphasis on the warrior aspects to its architectural focus on weapon forges and training facilities. The aspect warriors of Biel-Tan achieved a level of skill that surpassed even the high standards of other Craftworlds. The dire Avengers, howling banshees, and fire dragons of Biel-Tan trained constantly, their shrines serving as centers of military excellence where the arts of war were refined to lethal perfection. The Craftworld's exarchs, those who had become so consumed with their chosen aspect that they could never leave it, provided instruction that transformed ordinary Asuryani into weapons of terrifying efficiency. Biel-Tan's military campaigns often focused on the elimination of younger races from worlds that had once belonged to the Aeldari Empire, their forces striking with surgical precision to remove what they viewed as contamination from sacred soil. Saim-Hann maintained the traditions of the wild riders who had roamed the outer reaches of the ancient empire. The Craftworld's culture emphasized speed, mobility, and the bond between rider and mount, though their steeds were now the anti-gravity jet bikes that had replaced the living creatures of their ancestors. Saim-Hann's architecture reflected this nomadic heritage, with wide open spaces and flowing designs that avoided the enclosed feeling of other Craftworlds. The various clans that made up Saim-Hann's population maintained their ancestral rivalries and alliances, creating a complex social structure that outsiders often found difficult to understand. The Wild Riders of Saim-Hann served as the Craftworld's primary military force, their jet bike squadrons capable of striking across vast distances with devastating effect. These warriors maintained many of the traditions of their pre-fall ancestors, including ritual scarification and the wearing of totemic symbols that identified their clan affiliations. The Craftworld's autarchs often emerged from the ranks of the Wild Riders, their understanding of mobile warfare making them natural leaders for the hit-and-run tactics that Saim-Hann employed against its enemies. Aeldari had once been among the most populous and prosperous of the Craftworlds, its vast chambers housing millions of Asuryani who had escaped the fall. The Craftworld's emphasis on the path of the artisan had created a society dedicated to the creation of beautiful and functional objects, their bonesingers achieving levels of skill that approached the legendary craftsmanship of their ancestors. Aeldari's architecture reflected this artistic focus, with structures that seemed to grow organically from the Craftworld's hull, their surfaces decorated with intricate patterns that told the history of the Asuryani people. The Tyranid invasion that devastated Aeldari transformed the Craftworld from a center of artistic achievement into a monument to loss and sacrifice. The Hive Fleet Kraken's assault killed millions of the Craftworld's inhabitants, forcing the survivors to take desperate measures to defend their home. The activation of the Craftworld's Wraith constructs, normally reserved for the most dire emergencies, turned the tide of battle, but at a terrible cost. Aeldari's population now consisted largely of the living dead, Wraithguard and Wraithblades animated by the souls of those who had fallen in the Craftworld's defense. The infinity circuits that ran through each Craftworld served as more than mere repositories for the souls of the dead. These psychic networks, constructed from crystallized wraithbone and maintained by the Craftworld's bonesingers, formed the spiritual heart of Asuryani civilization. When an Asuryani died, their soul was captured within a spirit stone, a psychically active gem that had been attuned to their individual psychic signature during their lifetime. These spirit stones were then integrated into the infinity circuit, allowing the deceased to continue contributing to their Craftworld's collective consciousness. The process of soul capture required precise timing and considerable skill from the Craftworld's spirit seers, specialized psychers who could perceive the moment of death and guide the departing soul into its prepared receptacle. Failure to complete this process meant that the soul would be claimed by Slaanesh, a fate considered worse than simple extinction. The spirit stones themselves were works of art as much as functional devices, each one carved with symbols and patterns that reflected the individual's achievements and personality during their lifetime. Within the infinity circuit, the souls of the dead existed in a state of peaceful contemplation, their consciousness merged with the greater whole while retaining their individual identity. These ancestral spirits could be consulted by the living through meditation and ritual, their accumulated wisdom providing guidance for important decisions. The most skilled spirit seers could even temporarily animate wraithbone constructs with the souls of great warriors, creating wraith lords and other war machines that combine the tactical knowledge of the dead with the durability of their artificial bodies. The governing structure of the Craftworlds centered around the Seer councils, bodies of experienced farseers who used their prophetic abilities to guide their people through the dangers of the post-fall galaxy. These councils operated through consensus rather than hierarchy, with each member contributing their unique perspective on the threads of fate that surrounded important decisions. The process of reaching agreement could take considerable time, as the farseers debated the various possible futures revealed by their visions, but the resulting decisions carried the weight of collective wisdom accumulated over millennia. The autarchs served as the military commanders of the Craftworlds, individuals who had walked multiple paths and achieved mastery in various aspects of warfare. Unlike the exarchs who had become trapped within a single aspect of combat, the autarchs retained the flexibility to adapt their tactics to changing circumstances. Their training encompassed not only the martial skills of the aspect warriors, but also the strategic thinking of the seer path and the technical knowledge of the artisan path. This broad education made them ideal leaders for the combined arms forces that the Craftworlds deployed against their enemies. The relationship between the Seer councils and the autarchs created a system of checks and balances that prevented any single individual from accumulating too much power. The Seers provided strategic guidance based on their visions of possible futures, while the autarchs translated these broad objectives into specific military operations. This division of responsibility ensured that both the spiritual and practical needs of the Craftworld were addressed, while preventing the kind of autocratic rule that might lead to the excesses that had doomed their ancestors. The bioengineering that sustained the Craftworlds extended beyond their basic life support systems to encompass every aspect of their inhabitants' daily lives. The Wraithbone construction techniques allowed for the creation of structures that could adapt to changing needs, growing new rooms or passages as required by the Craftworld's population. The Bonesingers who shaped these materials worked in harmony with the Craftworld's existing systems, their psychic abilities allowing them to perceive the optimal placement for new construction that would enhance rather than disrupt the vessel's overall function. The philosophical foundation underlying the path system emerged from the desperate need to prevent the psychic overflow that had birthed Slaanesh and consumed the Aeldari Empire. The Asuryani understood that their heightened emotional capacity and psychic sensitivity, once sources of strength and artistic achievement, had become existential threats in a galaxy where she who thirsts hungered for their souls. The ancient Aeldari had experienced all emotions simultaneously, their consciousness capable of processing multiple contradictory feelings and sensations without apparent strain. This emotional complexity had driven their artistic achievements to heights that lesser species could barely comprehend, but it had also created the psychic turbulence that fed the nascent chaos god growing in the warp. The path system represented a fundamental restructuring of Asuryani consciousness, replacing the chaotic pursuit of sensation with disciplined focus on specific aspects of existence. Rather than experiencing the full spectrum of emotion at once, an individual following a path would channel their psychic energy into a single area of expertise, mastering it completely before moving to the next stage of their spiritual development. This compartmentalization served multiple purposes. It prevented the kind of psychic resonance that had attracted Slaanesh's attention. It allowed for the development of specialized skills necessary for Craftworld survival, and it provided a framework for personal growth that emphasized self-control over self-indulgence. The transition from one path to another required careful preparation and ritual purification, overseen by the Craftworld spirit seers who could monitor the individual's psychic state throughout the process. The period between paths, known as the Twilight, represented a time of particular vulnerability when the Asuryani's emotional barriers were temporarily lowered. During these intervals, individuals often retreated to meditation chambers within the Craftworld's core, surrounded by the stabilizing influence of the Infinity Circuit, while they prepared their consciousness for the next stage of their journey. The Path of the Warrior dominated the military culture of the Craftworlds, channeling the violent impulses inherent in Asuryani nature into highly ritualized forms of combat. The aspect warriors who followed this path did not simply learn to fight, they became living embodiments of specific forms of warfare, their personalities, and even their physical appearance gradually transforming to match their chosen aspect. The Dire Avengers exemplified disciplined ranged combat, their movements precise and economical as they delivered devastating volleys of shuriken fire. Their aspect armor, crafted from specialized wraithbone and psychically active materials, enhanced their natural reflexes while providing protection against enemy attacks. The Howling Banshees represented the fury of close combat, their war cries capable of paralyzing enemies with psychic terror, while their power weapons carved through armor and flesh with equal ease. The transformation that occurred within these warriors went beyond mere training. Their vocal cords actually adapted to produce the subsonic frequencies that characterized their battle screams, while their nervous systems became hypersensitive to the movements of nearby enemies. The Banshee mask, an integral part of their equipment, amplified these natural abilities while protecting the wearer from the psychological effects of their own psychic assault. Fire dragons specialized in the destruction of heavily armored targets, their fusion guns capable of melting through the thickest armor plating or reducing fortified positions to slag. These warriors developed an almost supernatural understanding of heat and energy, their enhanced senses allowing them to detect weak points in enemy armor that would be invisible to others. The dragon-scale armor they wore provided protection against the extreme temperatures generated by their weapons, while their helmets contained sophisticated targeting systems that could calculate the optimal angle and power setting for each shot. The striking scorpions embodied the principles of stealth and infiltration, their chameleon cloaks allowing them to blend seamlessly with their surroundings, while their enhanced senses tracked enemies through even the most challenging terrain. These warriors underwent extensive modification of their sensory organs, developing the ability to detect minute changes in air pressure, temperature, and electromagnetic fields that indicated the presence of hidden foes. Their mandiblasters, weapons integrated directly into their helmets, could fire streams of monomolecular wire or concentrated bursts of psychic energy that disrupted enemy nervous systems. Dark Reapers represented the grim necessity of long-range firepower, their heavy weapons capable of eliminating threats from distances that placed them beyond retaliation. These warriors developed an almost mechanical precision in their movements, their enhanced nervous systems allowing them to compensate for factors like wind speed, gravity variations, and target movement with unconscious ease. The Reaper Launcher, their signature weapon, fired missiles guided by the warrior's psychic abilities, each projectile capable of adjusting its trajectory mid-flight to ensure maximum destructive effect. The Swooping Hawks mastered aerial combat, their wings allowing them to strike from unexpected angles, while their grenade packs provided devastating area effect weapons. These warriors underwent the most extensive physical modifications of any aspect, their bone structure lightening to support flight, while their respiratory systems adapted to function at high altitudes. The Hawk's Talon, their close combat weapon, incorporated power field generators that could slice through enemy armor with minimal effort, while their last blasters provided accurate fire support during their aerial maneuvers. The transformation into an aspect warrior was not merely physical but psychological, as the individual's personality gradually aligned with the martial philosophy of their chosen aspect. This process, known as the becoming, could take decades to complete and required constant vigilance from the Craftworld spirit seers to ensure that the warrior did not lose themselves entirely in their aspect's nature. The most skilled warriors learned to channel their aspect's characteristics while maintaining their individual identity, but others found themselves increasingly unable to function outside the context of their martial role. The path of the Seer attracted those Asuryani with the strongest psychic abilities, offering them the training necessary to safely develop their powers while serving their Craftworld's needs. The initial stages of this path focused on meditation and mental discipline, teaching the student to perceive the currents of the warp without being overwhelmed by its chaotic nature. The Seer path required years of preparation before the student could safely attempt even the most basic divination techniques, as uncontrolled psychic activity could attract the attention of demons, or worse, Slaanesh herself. Warlocks represented the intermediate stage of the Seer path, combining psychic abilities with martial training to serve as battlefield commanders and support personnel. These individuals learned to channel their powers through specialized weapons and equipment, their witchblades serving as both melee weapons and psychic focuses. The Singing Spear, another common warlock weapon, could be thrown with psychic guidance to strike targets at considerable range before returning to its wielder's hand. Warlocks often led guardian squads into battle, their psychic abilities allowing them to coordinate the movements of multiple units while providing supernatural protection against enemy attacks. The Farseers represented the ultimate expression of the Seer path, their prophetic abilities allowing them to perceive the branching possibilities of future events with startling clarity. These individuals had spent centuries developing their psychic powers, their consciousness expanded to encompass perspectives that would drive ordinary minds to madness. The process of becoming a Farseer required the gradual replacement of organic brain tissue with psychically active crystals, a transformation that enhanced their abilities while slowly divorcing them from normal emotional responses. The Farseer's equipment reflected their unique role within Craftworld society. Their runes, carved from wraithbone and inscribed with psychically active symbols, served as both divination tools and weapons, each one capable of channeling specific types of psychic energy. The Ghost Helm, worn by all Farseers, provided protection against psychic backlash while amplifying their natural abilities. The singing spear or witchblade carried by each farseer had been crafted specifically for their use, its psychic resonance attuned to their individual mental patterns. The path of the artisan encompassed the creative and technical skills necessary for Craftworld survival, from the bonesingers who shaped wraithbone structures to the engineers who maintained the vessel's complex systems. This path attracted individuals with strong aesthetic sensibilities and technical aptitude, their training combining artistic expression with practical engineering knowledge. The bonesingers represented the most visible practitioners of this path, their psychic abilities allowing them to shape wraithbone as if it were clay, creating structures that combined beauty with functionality. The process of bone shaping required intimate knowledge of the material's properties and the psychic techniques necessary to manipulate its growth patterns. Bonesingers spent years learning to perceive the internal structure of wraithbone, their enhanced senses allowing them to detect stress points and growth patterns that would be invisible to others. The most skilled practitioners could create complex mechanisms with moving parts, their psychic abilities guiding the material's development to produce intricate gear systems and control interfaces. The path of service encompassed the various support roles necessary for Craftworld function, from the maintenance crews, who kept the vessel's systems operational, to the agricultural specialists, who managed the food production facilities. This path attracted individuals with strong communal instincts and practical skills, their training focusing on the technical knowledge necessary to maintain the Craftworld's complex infrastructure. The Guardians, citizen soldiers who formed the backbone of Craftworld military forces, often walked this path between their periods of active service. The concept of the Lost represented one of the most tragic aspects of the path system, as some individuals became so consumed with their chosen path that they lost the ability to move forward in their spiritual development. These Asuryani found themselves trapped within a single aspect of existence, their consciousness gradually narrowing until they could no longer perceive alternatives to their current state. The Lost often displayed exceptional skill within their chosen field, but their inability to progress beyond their current path made them objects of both admiration and pity within Craftworld society. The process of becoming lost was gradual and often imperceptible to the individual concerned. The first signs included an increasing reluctance to participate in activities outside their chosen path, followed by a growing inability to understand perspectives that differed from their own. As the condition progressed, the lost individual would begin to lose memories and experiences that did not relate directly to their path, their consciousness gradually editing out aspects of their personality that conflicted with their chosen role. The Craftworld Spirit Seers maintained constant vigilance for signs of this condition, intervening when possible to guide individuals away from the brink of becoming lost. The treatment involved intensive psychic therapy designed to restore the individual's connection to their broader identity, often requiring temporary isolation from their chosen path while they rebuilt their psychological flexibility. However, some cases proved too advanced for intervention, leaving the Craftworld with individuals who possessed extraordinary skills but had lost the ability to grow beyond their current limitations. The Exarchs represented a specialized form of the Lost, individuals who had become so consumed with the path of the warrior that they could never leave their chosen aspect shrine. These warriors had transcended normal limitations through their complete identification with their aspect's nature, their skills reaching levels that surpassed even the most accomplished aspect warriors. The transformation into an Exarch was irreversible, as the individual's consciousness became permanently fused with their aspect's psychic imprint. The process of becoming an Exarch began with the donning of the shrine's ceremonial armor, ancient suits of wraithbone, and psychically active materials that contained the accumulated experience of previous Exarchs. This armor, known as the Exarch suit, formed a psychic link with its wearer that gradually overwrote their individual personality with the collective identity of their aspect. The transformation could take years or decades to complete, during which the individual retained their personal memories while slowly adopting the mindset and mannerisms of their predecessors. The Exarch's role within the shrine extended beyond mere instruction to encompass the preservation of their aspects, traditions, and techniques. These individuals served as living repositories of martial knowledge, their consciousness containing the accumulated wisdom of countless warriors who had walked the same path. The Exarch suit itself played a crucial role in this process, its psychic matrices storing the memories and experiences of previous wearers, while gradually adding the current occupants' contributions to the collective whole. The weapons carried by Exarchs reflected their unique status within Craftworld society. The Dire Sword, wielded by Dire Avenger Exarchs, contained a psychic matrix that could disrupt enemy nervous systems with a single cut, while the Executioner, carried by some striking Scorpion Exarchs, incorporated power field generators that could slice through the heaviest armor. These weapons were not merely tools, but extensions of the Exarch's consciousness, their psychic resonance attuned to their wielders' mental patterns through centuries of use. The shrines themselves served as more than training facilities, functioning as spiritual centers where the essence of each aspect was preserved and transmitted to new generations of warriors. The architecture of these buildings reflected their aspect's nature, with howling banshee shrines featuring acoustic chambers that amplified sound, while fire dragon shrines incorporated forges and testing ranges for their fusion weapons. The central chamber of each shrine contained the Exarch's throne, a seat of power that served as both command center and meditation focus for the shrine's master. The progression from ordinary Asuryani to Farseer represents one of the most perilous journeys within the path system, requiring decades of preparation and a willingness to sacrifice one's connection to normal existence in pursuit of prophetic mastery. The initial stages of the Seer path begin with years of meditation and mental conditioning, as novice Seers learn to perceive the subtle currents of psychic energy that flow through the Craftworld's infinity circuits. These early exercises focus on developing the mental discipline necessary to maintain consciousness while experiencing visions that would shatter untrained minds, teaching students to observe the chaotic streams of possibility without being swept away by their intensity. The training chambers where these novices practice their arts are located deep within the Craftworld's core, surrounded by layers of psychically active wraithbone that filter and moderate the raw energies of the warp. The walls of these chambers are inscribed with thousands of runes, each one serving as both a focus for meditation and a ward against the malevolent entities that prowl the immaterium. The air itself seems to shimmer with barely contained power, as generations of Seers have saturated these spaces with their psychic emanations, creating an environment where the boundaries between past, present, and future become permeable. The transformation from student to warlock marks the first major milestone in the Seer path, as the individual learns to combine their developing psychic abilities with martial training. This fusion of mystical and physical disciplines creates warriors capable of channeling the warp's power through specialized weapons, while maintaining the combat effectiveness necessary for battlefield leadership. The Witchblade, primary weapon of the warlock, serves as both a conduit for psychic energy and a deadly close combat weapon, its crystalline matrix responding to the wielder's mental commands by generating power fields that can slice through ceramite armor. The process of attuning to a Witchblade requires months of careful preparation, as the weapon's psychic matrix must be synchronized with the warlock's individual mental patterns. Each blade contains fragments of wraithbone that have been grown specifically for its intended wielder, their molecular structure altered through psychic manipulation to create resonance chambers that amplify the user's natural abilities. The blade's edge, sharper than any conventional weapon, can cut through both physical matter and psychic barriers, making it equally effective against armored opponents and demonic entities. Warlocks who specialize in ranged combat often favor the Singing Spear, a weapon that combines the functions of a staff and a projectile. The spear's shaft contains psychically active crystals that store and channel the wielder's mental energy, while its pointed tip can be launched with devastating accuracy across considerable distances. The weapon's psychic guidance system allows it to adjust its trajectory mid-flight, striking targets that would be impossible to hit through conventional means before returning to the warlock's hand through telekinetic manipulation. The battlefield role of warlocks extends beyond simple combat support to encompass tactical coordination and strategic planning. Their psychic abilities allow them to maintain telepathic contact with multiple units simultaneously, creating a communication network that operates faster than any technological system. This mental link enables Guardian squads to coordinate their movements with supernatural precision, their individual actions combining into complex tactical maneuvers that appear choreographed to outside observers. The psychic disciplines mastered by warlocks encompass three primary areas of study, each requiring years of dedicated practice to achieve even basic competency. The first discipline, known as Runes of Battle, focuses on the direct manipulation of battlefield conditions through psychic intervention. Practitioners learn to create protective barriers that deflect incoming fire, enhance the physical capabilities of allied troops, or disrupt enemy equipment through targeted electromagnetic interference. The most advanced techniques in this discipline allow warlocks to manipulate probability itself, causing enemy weapons to malfunction at critical moments, or ensuring that friendly fire finds its target despite seemingly impossible odds. The second discipline, Runes of Fate, concerns itself with the perception and manipulation of future possibilities. Warlocks who specialize in this area develop the ability to perceive the branching paths of potential outcomes that stem from current actions, allowing them to guide their forces toward favorable results while avoiding catastrophic failures. The practice of this discipline requires extraordinary mental flexibility, as the Seer must maintain awareness of multiple contradictory possibilities simultaneously without allowing the paradoxes to drive them to madness. The third discipline, known as Runes of Warding, focuses on protection against psychic attack and the banishment of demonic entities. This area of study proves particularly crucial for Craftworld defense, as the Asuryani's psychic nature makes them prime targets for the predations of chaos. Warlocks who master these techniques can create psychic barriers that prevent demon manifestation, cleanse areas contaminated by warp energy, or even banish lesser demons back to the immaterium through focused willpower. The transition from warlock to farseer represents the most dangerous phase of the Seer path, as the individual must undergo physical and mental modifications that will permanently alter their relationship with normal reality. The process begins with the surgical implantation of psychically active crystals into the candidate's brain tissue, each crystal serving as both an amplifier for their natural abilities and a buffer against the psychological strain of extended precognitive visions. These implants, grown from specialized wraith bone and infused with the psychic essence of previous farseers, create a neural network that can process information at superhuman speeds while maintaining the stability necessary for coherent thought. The crystalline implants gradually replace portions of the candidate's organic brain tissue, a transformation that enhances their psychic abilities while slowly divorcing them from normal emotional responses. Farseers who have undergone this process report that their perception of time becomes increasingly fluid, with past and future events appearing as vivid and immediate as present circumstances. This temporal displacement allows them to perceive the consequences of actions before they are taken, but it also creates a growing sense of detachment from the immediate concerns of their fellow Asuryani. The prophetic abilities of farseers operate through their manipulation of the skein of fate, a metaphysical concept that describes the interconnected web of cause and effect that links all events across time and space. Farseers perceive this skein as a vast tapestry of glowing threads, each one representing a possible sequence of events that could unfold depending on the choices made by individuals and groups. The threads constantly shift and change as new possibilities emerge and old ones fade, creating a dynamic pattern that requires constant attention to interpret correctly. The process of reading the skein requires the farseer to enter a trance state that allows their consciousness to expand beyond the normal boundaries of individual perception. During these sessions, the Seer's awareness encompasses multiple timelines simultaneously, their enhanced mind processing vast amounts of information while searching for patterns that indicate probable outcomes. The experience proves exhausting even for individuals with extensive training, as the human consciousness was never designed to process such complex temporal data. The runes used by farseers serve as both divination tools and weapons, each one carved from wraithbone and inscribed with symbols that channel specific types of psychic energy. The creation of a rune set requires years of careful preparation, as each symbol must be attuned to the individual farseer's mental patterns while maintaining the traditional meanings that have been passed down through generations of seers. The most common runes include the Rune of Witnessing, which enhances the user's ability to perceive distant events, and the Rune of Warding, which provides protection against psychic attack. The casting of runes for divination purposes involves more than simple fortune-telling, as the farseer uses the symbols to focus their consciousness on specific aspects of the skein of fate. The pattern in which the runes fall provides a framework for interpreting the visions that follow, with each symbol's position relative to the others indicating the relationships between different causal factors. The most skilled farseers can derive detailed tactical information from these readings, predicting enemy movements and identifying optimal strategies for achieving their objectives. The dangers inherent in peering too deeply into the future cannot be overstated, as the process of prophetic vision exposes the farseer's consciousness to the raw chaos of the warp. Extended periods of precognitive activity can result in temporal displacement, where the seer's awareness becomes locked into a specific timeline and loses the ability to perceive present events. This condition, known as the curse of foresight, leaves the affected individual conscious, but unable to interact meaningfully with their immediate surroundings, their attention focused entirely on events that may never come to pass. The psychological strain of maintaining awareness across multiple timelines also creates the risk of prophetic madness, a condition where the farseer's consciousness fragments into multiple personalities, each one focused on a different possible future. Individuals suffering from this affliction may appear to carry on conversations with people who are not present, responding to events that exist only in potential timelines, while ignoring immediate threats to their safety. The Craftworld Spirit Seers monitor all practicing farseers for signs of this condition, intervening when possible to restore the individual's connection to present reality. The Seer Councils that govern the Craftworlds represent the collective wisdom of the most experienced farseers, their combined prophetic abilities allowing them to perceive threats and opportunities that would be invisible to individual seers. These councils operate through consensus rather than hierarchy, with each member contributing their unique perspective on the threads of fate that surround important decisions. The process of reaching agreement can take considerable time, as the farseers must reconcile conflicting visions and interpret the sometimes contradictory messages provided by their divinations. The council chambers where these deliberations take place are marvels of psychic architecture, their wraithbone walls inscribed with thousands of runes that amplify and focus the collective mental energy of the assembled seers. The central focus of each chamber is a massive crystal formation that serves as both a scrying device and a repository for the council's accumulated wisdom. This crystal, grown over centuries through the combined efforts of the Craftworld's bonesingers and farseers, contains the psychic imprints of every major decision made by the Council, creating a living record of the Craftworld's history. The decision-making process employed by Seer Councils reflects the complex nature of prophetic vision, as each farseer's interpretation of future events must be weighed against the perspectives of their colleagues. The councils employ sophisticated techniques for reconciling contradictory visions, using mathematical models and probability calculations to determine the most likely outcomes from the various possibilities revealed by their divinations. The final decisions represent a synthesis of multiple prophetic perspectives, creating strategies that account for the maximum number of potential variables. Eldred Ulthrin of Ulthwé stands as perhaps the most influential farseer in the galaxy, his prophetic abilities and political acumen having shaped the course of galactic events for over 10,000 years. His mastery of the skein of fate exceeds that of any other living seer, his visions encompassing not just individual craftworlds, but the entire struggle between order and chaos that defines the current age. Eldred's interventions in galactic affairs often appear subtle or even counterproductive to outside observers, but his actions consistently serve to prevent catastrophes that would otherwise consume entire star systems. The extent of Eldred's prophetic abilities became apparent during the 13th Black Crusade, when his warnings about Abaddon's true objectives allowed Imperial forces to prepare defenses that might otherwise have been overwhelmed. His manipulation of events leading up to the Crusade involved decades of careful planning, as he worked to position key individuals and resources where they would be most effective against the forces of chaos. The complexity of his schemes required him to maintain awareness of thousands of different causal threads simultaneously, a feat that would have driven lesser seers to madness. Eldred's relationship with other farseers reflects both his extraordinary abilities and the isolation that comes with such power. His visions often encompass events that will not occur for centuries or millennia, making it difficult for him to explain his actions to colleagues who focus on more immediate concerns. This temporal displacement has gradually separated him from normal Asuryani society, as his consciousness operates on timescales that make ordinary social interaction increasingly difficult to maintain. The influence of farseers extends beyond their own craftworlds to encompass the broader struggle for survival that defines Asuryani civilization. Their prophetic abilities allow them to identify threats before they fully manifest, enabling preemptive strikes that can prevent disasters that would otherwise prove unstoppable. The coordination between different Craftworld Seer councils creates an informal network of information sharing that spans the galaxy, with warnings and strategic intelligence passed between distant communities through psychic communication. The price paid by those who walk the Seer path to its ultimate conclusion cannot be measured in simple terms, as the transformation from ordinary Asuryani to Farseer involves the gradual sacrifice of everything that defines normal existence. The enhanced perception that allows them to perceive the skein of fate also separates them from the immediate concerns of their people, creating a growing sense of isolation that can never be fully overcome. The crystalline implants that enhance their abilities also limit their emotional responses, making it increasingly difficult for them to relate to individuals who have not undergone similar modifications. Despite these sacrifices, the Farseers continue their vigil, their prophetic abilities serving as the primary defense against the countless threats that seek to destroy the remnants of Asuryani civilization. Their visions guide the Craftworlds through the treacherous currents of galactic politics, identifying allies and enemies while revealing the optimal strategies for survival in a universe that grows more hostile with each passing year. The burden of this responsibility weighs heavily on individuals who can perceive the full scope of the challenges facing their people, but their dedication to preserving the future of the Asuryani remains absolute. The warrior traditions of the Asuryani crystallized around the fragmented essence of Kine, the ancient Aeldari god of war whose divine form was shattered during Slaanesh's catastrophic birth. Each fragment of the bloody-handed god's consciousness became the spiritual foundation for a different aspect of warfare, creating distinct martial disciplines that embodied specific facets of combat excellence. The aspect warriors who follow these paths do not merely learn fighting techniques, they undergo a fundamental transformation that aligns their consciousness with the primal essence of their chosen aspect, becoming living weapons shaped by millennia of accumulated martial wisdom. The Dire Avengers represent the most disciplined and versatile of the aspect warriors, their training focused on the precise application of ranged firepower combined with tactical flexibility. These warriors embody the controlled fury of Kine's martial aspect, their movements economical and purposeful as they deliver devastating volleys of shuriken fire with mechanical precision. The transformation undergone by Dire Avengers affects both their physical capabilities and their mental processes, enhancing their reflexes to superhuman levels while developing an almost supernatural awareness of battlefield conditions. The distinctive armor worn by dire Avengers consists of interlocking plates of wraithbone and psychically active ceramics, its blue and white coloration serving both ceremonial and practical purposes. The armor's psychic matrices respond to the wearer's mental state, providing enhanced protection when the warrior achieves the focused calm that characterizes their aspect's philosophy. The helmet's targeting systems integrate directly with the warrior's enhanced nervous system, creating a seamless interface between biological perception and technological augmentation that allows for targeting accuracy impossible to achieve through conventional means. The Avenger's Shuriken catapult serves as the primary weapon of these warriors, its design representing thousands of years of refinement in the pursuit of optimal ranged combat effectiveness. The weapon's magazine contains hundreds of monomolecular discs that can be fired in rapid succession, each projectile guided by the warrior's psychic abilities to ensure maximum accuracy. The Shuriken's razor-sharp edges can slice through ceramite armor and reinforced bone with equal ease, while their small size allows for a high rate of fire that can overwhelm even heavily armored opponents through sheer volume of projectiles. The training regimen followed by dire Avengers emphasizes the development of what their instructors call the perfect moment, a state of consciousness where the warrior's awareness encompasses every relevant factor on the battlefield simultaneously. This mental state allows them to identify optimal firing positions, predict enemy movements, and coordinate their actions with other squad members without conscious thought. The achievement of this state requires years of meditation and practice, as the warrior learns to process vast amounts of sensory information while maintaining the emotional detachment necessary for effective combat. Howling Banshees channel the wild fury of Kain's berserker aspect, their combat style emphasizing speed, aggression, and the psychological impact of their terrifying war cries. These warriors undergo extensive modification of their vocal apparatus, developing the ability to produce subsonic frequencies that can paralyze enemies with fear while disrupting electronic systems through acoustic interference. The transformation process also enhances their reflexes and muscular coordination, allowing them to move with a fluid grace that makes them nearly impossible to target in close combat. The Banshee mask represents the most iconic element of their equipment, its stylized features designed to amplify the warrior's natural abilities while protecting them from the psychological effects of their own psychic assault. The mask's internal systems monitor the wearer's vocal output and adjust the acoustic properties of their war cry to achieve maximum effectiveness against specific enemy types. The flowing hair that extends from the mask serves both ceremonial and practical purposes, its psychically active fibers responding to the warrior's emotional state while providing enhanced sensory feedback about air currents and nearby movement. The power sword wielded by Howling Banshees incorporates technology that predates the fall, its blade surrounded by an energy field that can slice through virtually any material. The weapon's psychic resonance matrix attunes itself to the wielder's mental patterns, becoming an extension of their consciousness rather than merely a tool. Master Banshees develop such intimate familiarity with their weapons that they can adjust the power field's intensity and configuration through unconscious mental commands, adapting their blades' properties to overcome specific types of armor or defensive systems. The combat doctrine employed by Howling Banshees emphasizes rapid deployment and overwhelming assault, their attacks designed to break enemy morale as much as to inflict physical casualties. Their characteristic war cry serves multiple tactical purposes, creating acoustic interference that disrupts enemy communications while generating psychic resonance that can cause opponents to freeze in terror. The most skilled Banshees can modulate their voices to produce specific frequencies that target the nervous systems of different species, causing paralysis, disorientation, or even cardiac arrest in susceptible individuals. Fire dragons embody Kain's aspect as the destroyer of fortifications and armored targets, their specialized equipment allowing them to eliminate threats that would prove impervious to conventional weapons. These warriors develop an almost supernatural understanding of heat and energy, their enhanced senses capable of detecting thermal signatures through heavy armor, while identifying structural weak points that would be invisible to ordinary perception. The transformation process includes modification of their visual cortex to perceive infrared radiation directly, while their nervous systems adapt to process the complex calculations required for optimal targeting of fusion weapons. The dragon-scale armor worn by these warriors provides protection against the extreme temperatures generated by their weapons, its layered construction incorporating heat dispersal systems that prevent the wearer from being cooked by their own firepower. The armor's distinctive red and orange coloration serves both symbolic and practical purposes, its psychically active pigments responding to thermal energy by becoming more reflective as temperatures increase. The helmet's targeting systems include sophisticated range-finding equipment and thermal imaging, arrays that allow the warrior to engage targets in complete darkness or through heavy smoke. The fusion gun represents the pinnacle of Asuryani anti-armor technology, its compact design concealing destructive power sufficient to melt through the heaviest battle tank armor. The weapon operates by containing and directing a miniature fusion reaction, creating a stream of superheated plasma that can reduce virtually any target to molten slag. The gun's psychic guidance systems allow the wielder to adjust the beam's focus and intensity through mental commands, enabling precise targeting of specific components or the creation of wide-area effects for clearing fortified positions. The tactical role of fire dragons extends beyond simple tank hunting to encompass the destruction of any target that conventional weapons cannot effectively engage. Their fusion guns prove equally effective against heavily armored infantry, fortified bunkers, and even the massive bioforms deployed by Tyranid hive fleets. The warriors' enhanced thermal perception allows them to identify critical systems within enemy vehicles, enabling them to disable targets with surgical precision rather than relying on brute force destruction. Dark Reapers represent the grim necessity of long-range firepower, their role on the battlefield emphasizing the elimination of threats before they can close to effective range. These warriors embody Khan's aspect as the harbinger of death, their training focused on achieving the perfect balance between patience and lethality that characterizes the ideal sniper. The transformation undergone by Dark Reapers affects their perception of time and space, allowing them to maintain absolute stillness for hours while remaining instantly ready to engage targets of opportunity. The distinctive black armor worn by Dark Reapers incorporates advanced stabilization systems that eliminate the minute tremors and movements that would otherwise compromise their accuracy. The armor's psychic matrices respond to the wearer's mental state, providing enhanced stability when the warrior achieves the meditative calm required for precision shooting. The helmet's targeting systems include sophisticated ballistic computers that calculate trajectory, wind speed, and target movement automatically, while the warrior's enhanced nervous system processes this information at superhuman speeds. The Reaper launcher serves as the primary weapon of these warriors, its design optimized for engaging targets at extreme range with devastating accuracy. The weapon fires psychically guided missiles that can adjust their trajectory mid-flight, allowing them to strike targets behind cover or to follow evasive maneuvers. The missiles themselves contain sophisticated warheads that can be programmed for different effects, from armor-piercing rounds designed to eliminate specific targets to cluster munitions that can devastate entire infantry formations. Striking Scorpions embody the principles of stealth and infiltration, their combat style emphasizing surprise attacks and the elimination of key targets through surgical precision. These warriors undergo extensive sensory enhancement that allows them to perceive minute changes in their environment, developing the ability to track enemies through sound, scent, and electromagnetic signatures that would be undetectable to ordinary senses. The transformation process includes modification of their skeletal structure to reduce noise generation, while their muscular systems adapt to provide explosive bursts of speed when launching ambush attacks. The chameleon cloak worn by Striking Scorpions represents one of the most sophisticated pieces of equipment in the Asuryani arsenal, its psychically active fibers responding to the wearer's mental commands by mimicking the visual and thermal characteristics of their surroundings. The cloak's effectiveness extends beyond simple camouflage to encompass electromagnetic stealth, its specialized materials absorbing and redirecting sensor sweeps that would otherwise reveal the warrior's position. The most skilled scorpions can remain virtually invisible even when moving, their cloaks adapting to changing environmental conditions faster than enemy sensors can track. The Mandiblaster integrated into each scorpion's helmet serves as both a weapon and a sensory enhancement device, its sophisticated targeting systems capable of engaging multiple targets simultaneously. The weapon fires streams of monomolecular wire or concentrated bursts of psychic energy, its effects ranging from simple stunning to complete nervous system disruption depending on the target's physiology. The Mandiblaster's psychic guidance systems allow it to track targets through cover, making it impossible for enemies to find safety once they have been marked for elimination. Swooping hawks master the three-dimensional battlefield that characterizes modern warfare, their wings allowing them to strike from unexpected angles while maintaining the mobility necessary to avoid retaliation. These warriors undergo the most extensive physical modifications of any aspect warrior, their bone structure lightening to support flight, while their respiratory and circulatory systems adapt to function at high altitudes. The transformation process includes the development of enhanced spatial awareness that allows them to navigate complex three-dimensional environments while maintaining perfect orientation regardless of their position relative to gravity. The Hawk's wings incorporate advanced gravitic technology that provides both lift and propulsion, their psychically active control surfaces responding to the warrior's mental commands with perfect precision. The wing's design allows for both sustained flight and rapid acceleration, enabling the Hawks to maintain air superiority over the battlefield while delivering devastating attacks against ground targets. The wing-mounted weapons systems include both defensive measures for aerial combat and offensive capabilities for ground attack missions. Warp spiders represent the most technologically advanced of the aspect warriors, their equipment allowing them to manipulate space-time itself through controlled teleportation. These warriors embody Kain's aspect as the unpredictable striker, their ability to appear and disappear at will making them nearly impossible to counter through conventional tactics. The transformation undergone by warp spiders affects their perception of dimensional space, allowing them to navigate the brief transitions through the warp that characterize their teleportation abilities without suffering the disorientation that would cripple ordinary individuals. The warp jump generator worn by each warp spider represents technology that borders on the miraculous, its compact design concealing mechanisms that can tear holes in reality itself. The device operates by creating temporary rifts in space-time that allow the warrior to step from one location to another instantaneously, though the process requires precise calculation to avoid materializing inside solid objects or emerging in locations that would prove immediately fatal. The generator's psychic guidance systems respond to the warrior's mental commands, enabling teleportation with pinpoint accuracy across distances of several hundred meters. Shining spears combine the mobility of jet bike-mounted cavalry with the precision of master warriors, their role on the battlefield emphasizing rapid strikes against high-value targets. These warriors maintain the traditions of the ancient Aeldari wild riders, though their mounts are now sophisticated anti-gravity vehicles rather than living creatures. The transformation undergone by Shining Spears enhances their spatial awareness and reaction times to levels that allow them to pilot their jet bikes at speeds that would prove fatal to unaugmented individuals. The Phoenix Lords stand as the first and greatest of the Exarchs, immortal beings whose consciousness has become permanently fused with the essence of their respective aspects. These legendary figures established the various aspect shrines during the early years following the fall, their teachings forming the foundation for all subsequent warrior traditions. Unlike ordinary exarchs, who represent the accumulated wisdom of their individual shrines, the Phoenix Lords embody the pure essence of their aspects, their abilities transcending the limitations that constrain even the most skilled mortal warriors. Asuryani, the Hand of Asuryani, holds the distinction of being the first Phoenix Lord and the founder of the Dire Avenger aspect. His mastery of ranged combat techniques exceeds that of any other warrior in the galaxy. His twin Avenger shuriken catapults capable of eliminating entire enemy formations through precisely coordinated fire. The armor worn by Asuryani incorporates technology that predates the fall, its psychic matrices providing protection that borders on invulnerability while enhancing his natural abilities to superhuman levels. Jane Zar, the Storm of Silence, established the Howling Banshee aspect and continues to serve as the ultimate expression of their combat philosophy. Her mastery of close combat techniques combines incredible speed with devastating effectiveness, her movements so fluid that she appears to flow across the battlefield like liquid death. The Silent Death, her signature weapon, incorporates power field technology that can slice through any known material while generating acoustic effects that complement her natural war cry. Fugan, the Burning Lance, founded the Fire Dragon aspect and represents the ultimate expression of their anti-armor specialization. His mastery of fusion weapons allows him to eliminate targets that would prove impervious to conventional assault. His fire pike, capable of melting through fortress walls or vaporizing entire enemy formations. The armor worn by Fugan provides complete protection against thermal effects while incorporating targeting systems that allow him to engage multiple targets simultaneously. Magan Ra, the Harvester of Souls, established the Dark Reaper aspect and continues to serve as the personification of death from afar. His mastery of long-range combat techniques allows him to eliminate enemies across impossible distances. His Magadar Reaper launcher capable of engaging targets that would be beyond the reach of any conventional weapon. The armor worn by Magan Ra incorporates stealth technology that makes him nearly impossible to detect, while his enhanced senses allow him to track enemies through any concealment. The aspect shrines within each craftworld serve as more than training facilities, functioning as spiritual centers where the essence of each aspect is preserved and transmitted to new generations of warriors. These buildings represent architectural marvels that combine aesthetic beauty with practical functionality, their wraithbone construction incorporating psychic matrices that enhance the training process while providing protection against external interference. The central chamber of each shrine contains the Exarch's throne, a seat of power that serves as both command center and meditation focus. The ritual of donning the war mask represents the most sacred ceremony within aspect warrior tradition, marking the moment when an individual commits themselves to their chosen path of warfare. The mask itself serves as more than mere protection, functioning as a psychic interface that connects the warrior to the collective consciousness of their aspect. The ceremony takes place within the shrine's inner sanctum, surrounded by the accumulated psychic imprints of every warrior who has previously walked the same path. The transformation that occurs during this ritual extends beyond the physical act of putting on equipment to encompass a fundamental alteration of the warrior's consciousness. The mask's psychic matrices begin the process of aligning the individual's mental patterns with their chosen aspect, initiating changes that will gradually reshape their personality and capabilities over the course of their training. The most skilled warriors learn to maintain their individual identity while channeling their aspect's characteristics, but others find themselves increasingly unable to function outside the context of their martial role. The shattering of Kine during Slaanesh's catastrophic birth left the ancient Aeldari god of war fragmented across the galaxy, his divine essence scattered into countless shards that would eventually become the spiritual foundation for the Asuryani's survival. Unlike the other members of the Aeldari pantheon, who were either consumed by She, who thirsts, or fled into the deepest reaches of the webway, Kine's nature as a deity of violence and conflict provided him with a unique form of protection against the newborn chaos god. The bloody-handed god's essence proved too violent and unpalatable for even Slaanesh to fully digest, resulting in his fragmentation rather than complete consumption. Each fragment of Kine's shattered consciousness retained a portion of his divine power and murderous intent, these pieces eventually finding their way to the Craftworlds that had escaped the fall. The iron statues that housed these fragments were not constructed by the Asuryani, but rather manifested spontaneously from the god's own will, their forms materializing within the Craftworld's most sacred chambers as physical anchors for his dispersed essence. These towering figures, standing nearly twice the height of an ordinary Asuryani, display the unmistakable characteristics of their divine origin through their perfect anatomical proportions and the aura of barely contained violence that surrounds them. The Avatar's physical form reflects Khan's dual nature as both a creator and destroyer, his muscular frame combining the aesthetic perfection that characterized the ancient Aeldari with the brutal functionality required for warfare. The statue's surface appears to be cast from a dark metallic substance that resembles iron, but possesses properties that defy conventional analysis, its molecular structure shifting between different configurations depending on the god's current state of arousal. When dormant, the Avatar appears as a lifeless sculpture, its features frozen in an expression of eternal rage that hints at the power contained within its immobile form. The ritual awakening of the Avatar represents one of the most dangerous and sacred ceremonies within Asuryani culture, requiring the voluntary sacrifice of a Craftworld's most skilled warriors to provide the blood necessary to rouse the slumbering god. The process begins with the selection of candidates from among the exarchs, those warriors who have become so consumed with their martial aspect that they can never leave their chosen path. These individuals understand that their participation in the ritual will result in their certain death, yet they compete for the honor of giving their lives to awaken their god's avatar. The ceremony takes place within the Craftworld's most sacred chamber, a vast space located at the vessel's heart, where the Avatar's iron form stands surrounded by crystalline formations that amplify psychic energy. The chamber's walls bear the carved histories of every awakening that has occurred since the Craftworld's founding, their wraithbone surfaces stained with the blood of countless warriors who have made the ultimate sacrifice for their people. The air itself seems to thrum with barely contained power, as the psychic resonance from previous ceremonies has saturated the space with the accumulated essence of violence and devotion. The chosen exarch approaches the Avatar's base, where ancient runes carved into the iron surface begin to glow with an inner fire as the warrior's life force draws near. The sacrifice must be made willingly and with full knowledge of its consequences, as any hesitation or doubt will cause the ritual to fail and result in the warrior's death without achieving the desired awakening. The exarch places their hands upon the Avatar's feet, allowing their blood to flow into the channels carved into the iron surface, while their consciousness merges with the fragment of Khan's essence contained within the statue. The moment of awakening transforms the Avatar from lifeless metal into a living embodiment of divine wrath, molten blood, flowing through channels that appear across its surface as the god's essence animates its physical form. The iron skin becomes superheated, glowing with the intensity of a forged fire, while maintaining its structural integrity through supernatural means. The Avatar's eyes ignite with flames that burn with colors that have no names, their light capable of causing permanent blindness to any who stare directly into them without proper protection. The transformation process generates temperatures that would prove lethal to unprotected individuals, forcing the ceremony's witnesses to maintain their distance while the Avatar completes its awakening. The air around the newly animated god shimmers with heat distortion, while the metal floor beneath its feet begins to glow red-hot from the radiant energy emanating from its form. The Avatar's first movements are deliberate and measured, as if testing the limitations of its physical vessel, while the god's consciousness fully integrates with its iron body. The Avatar's role in battle extends far beyond simple combat effectiveness to encompass the psychological and spiritual impact of its presence on both allied and enemy forces. Asuryani warriors who fight alongside the Avatar experience a surge of martial prowess that transcends their normal capabilities, their connection to Khan's essence through the Craftworld's psychic network, allowing them to channel a fraction of the god's supernatural abilities. This enhancement manifests as increased reflexes, improved accuracy, and a fearlessness that borders on recklessness, transforming ordinary Guardian squads into elite fighting forces capable of matching the galaxy's most skilled warriors. The Avatar's physical capabilities reflect its divine nature, with strength sufficient to tear through ceramite armor with its bare hands and speed that allows it to keep pace with the fastest vehicles on the battlefield. Its iron skin provides protection that exceeds even the most advanced armor systems, capable of deflecting weapons fire that would destroy battle tanks while remaining flexible enough to allow for fluid movement. The god's supernatural durability extends beyond mere physical toughness to encompass resistance to psychic attacks and immunity to most forms of environmental hazard. The Wailing Doom, the Avatar's signature weapon, represents one of the most powerful artifacts in the Asuryani arsenal, its form shifting between sword and spear depending on the tactical requirements of each engagement. The weapon's blade burns with the same supernatural fire that flows through the Avatar's veins, its edge capable of cutting through any known material while leaving wounds that refuse to heal through conventional means. The psychic resonance generated by the weapon disrupts enemy morale and coordination, creating an aura of terror that can cause entire formations to break and flee before the Avatar even reaches combat range. The Avatar's tactical flexibility allows it to adapt to different combat situations with supernatural efficiency, its divine consciousness capable of processing battlefield information and adjusting its strategy in real time. Against heavily armored opponents, the Avatar employs its immense strength to crush enemy vehicles and fortifications through brute force, while against more mobile enemies, it demonstrates speed and agility that seem impossible for a being of its size. The god's combat style combines the disciplined techniques of the aspect warriors with the primal fury of its divine nature, creating a fighting method that is both elegant and terrifyingly effective. The psychological impact of the Avatar's presence extends beyond the immediate battlefield to affect the morale and determination of entire enemy armies. The sight of the burning god advancing through their ranks can cause even the most disciplined troops to panic, while the psychic emanations from its form create an atmosphere of dread that saps the will to fight from all but the most fanatical opponents. Enemy commanders who have faced the Avatar in battle report that its presence seems to drain the courage from their forces, turning veteran soldiers into frightened recruits who are more concerned with escape than victory. The Avatar's relationship with the Craftworld's Infinity Circuit creates a unique form of tactical coordination that allows it to operate as part of a larger strategic framework rather than simply as an individual combatant. The god's consciousness can interface directly with the Craftworld's psychic network, receiving real-time intelligence about enemy movements and friendly force dispositions, while coordinating its actions with other elements of the Asuryani battle plan. This integration allows the Avatar to serve as both a devastating assault weapon and a command node that enhances the effectiveness of all allied forces operating in its vicinity. The fragmented nature of Kain's essence means that each Avatar possesses slightly different characteristics and capabilities, reflecting the specific aspects of the god's nature that dominate its particular fragment. Some Avatars display greater tactical acumen and serve as battlefield commanders, while others embody pure destructive fury and function as unstoppable assault weapons. These variations create unique challenges for enemy forces, as tactics that prove effective against one Avatar may be completely useless against another that embodies different aspects of Kain's divine nature. The cyclical nature of the Avatar's existence reflects the broader themes of death and rebirth that permeate Asuryani philosophy, as each awakening requires the sacrifice of a warrior whose essence becomes part of the god's accumulated consciousness. The Avatar retains memories and experiences from previous awakenings, creating a form of immortality that transcends individual physical manifestations while preserving the wisdom gained through countless battles. This accumulated knowledge makes each successive Avatar more dangerous than its predecessors, as the god's tactical understanding continues to evolve through repeated exposure to different forms of warfare. The process of the Avatar's return to dormancy occurs when the immediate threat that prompted its awakening has been eliminated, the god's consciousness gradually withdrawing from its iron form until only the lifeless statue remains. This transition does not represent true death, but rather a return to the slumber that characterizes the Avatar's default state, with the god's essence remaining ready to be awakened again when the Craftworld faces sufficient danger. The iron form retains traces of the god's presence even when dormant, its surface bearing scorch marks and battle damage that serve as reminders of its previous manifestations. The strategic implications of the Avatar's presence extend beyond individual battles to encompass the broader struggle for survival that defines Asuryani civilization in the post-fall galaxy. The knowledge that their god of war can be awakened in times of dire need provides psychological comfort to Craftworld populations, while serving as a deterrent to potential enemies who might otherwise view the Asuryani as vulnerable targets. The Avatar's reputation for invincibility in personal combat has become legendary throughout the galaxy, with many enemy commanders choosing to withdraw their forces rather than face the burning god in direct confrontation. The Avatar's connection to the broader network of Kain's fragments creates the potential for coordination between different Craftworlds during large-scale conflicts, as the god's consciousness can theoretically communicate across vast distances through the psychic resonance shared by all his manifestations. This capability has been observed during major campaigns where multiple Craftworlds have deployed their avatars simultaneously, the burning gods displaying tactical coordination that suggests a level of communication beyond what should be possible for separate entities. The full extent of this network remains unknown even to the Asuryani themselves, as the god's consciousness operates according to principles that transcend mortal understanding. The Avatar's role as both protector and destroyer embodies the fundamental contradictions that define Asuryani existence in the current age, representing their people's desperate need for violent solutions to existential threats, while simultaneously serving as a reminder of the path that led to their ancestors' downfall. The god's awakening always comes at a terrible cost, requiring the sacrifice of warriors whose skills and knowledge would otherwise contribute to the Craftworld's long-term survival. This price reflects the broader theme of sacrifice that permeates Asuryani culture, as their survival as a species requires constant choices between immediate necessity and long-term consequences. The Avatar's influence on Asuryani military doctrine extends beyond its direct combat capabilities to encompass the psychological and spiritual effects of its presence on warrior training and battlefield performance. Aspect warriors who have fought alongside an Avatar report that the experience fundamentally changes their understanding of combat, providing them with insights into the nature of warfare that cannot be gained through conventional training. These warriors often display enhanced combat effectiveness long after the Avatar has returned to dormancy, their consciousness having been permanently altered by exposure to the god's divine essence. The technological aspects of the Avatar's manifestation continue to puzzle even the most skilled bone singers and spirit seers, as the process by which divine consciousness animates inorganic matter defies conventional understanding of both psychic phenomena and material science. The iron form's ability to generate and contain the extreme temperatures required for the Avatar's operation suggests the presence of technology that predates the fall, possibly representing artifacts from the height of Aeldari civilization, when the boundaries between science and sorcery were largely meaningless. The webway stands as the greatest achievement of the ancient Aeldari Empire, a vast network of psychic tunnels that spans the galaxy and connects realms across dimensions in ways that defy conventional understanding of space and time. This labyrinthine construct exists within the spaces between reality and the warp, carved through the immaterium by the combined psychic might of the Aeldari race under the guidance of their gods during the height of their civilization. The tunnels themselves exist in a state of controlled dimensional flux, their walls reinforced by psychic barriers that prevent the chaotic energies of the warp from breaching their integrity while maintaining the structural stability necessary for safe passage. The construction of the webway required millennia of coordinated effort, with entire generations of Aeldari dedicating their lives to expanding and maintaining the network. The process involved more than simple excavation through psychic space. It required the careful manipulation of dimensional boundaries to create stable passages that could withstand the corrosive effects of warp exposure while remaining navigable by travelers. The Aeldari engineers who designed these passages possessed understanding of spatial mechanics that transcended the crude three-dimensional thinking of younger races, their calculations encompassing mathematical principles that exist only in higher dimensional space. The webway gates that serve as entry points to the network represent marvels of psychic engineering, their towering structures combining aesthetic beauty with functional necessity. These portals consist of wraithbone frameworks that channel and focus psychic energy, their surfaces rippling with otherworldly light as dimensional barriers thin to allow passage between realms. The gates themselves respond to the mental commands of authorized users, their activation requiring specific psychic signatures that prevent unauthorized access while maintaining the security of the network against intrusion by hostile forces. The damage inflicted upon the webway during Slaanesh's birth created catastrophic disruptions throughout the network, with entire sections collapsing or becoming infested with demonic entities that now prowl the abandoned passages. The psychic shockwaves generated by the new Chaos God's emergence tore through the carefully maintained dimensional barriers, creating breaches that allowed the raw chaos of the warp to pour into previously secure tunnels. Many of these damaged sections remain inaccessible to the Asuryani, their passages filled with temporal anomalies and spatial distortions that make navigation impossible even for the most skilled webway pilots. The surviving portions of the network continue to serve the Craftworlds as their primary means of rapid deployment and strategic mobility, though the constant threat of demonic incursion requires vigilant maintenance by specialized teams of spirit seers and rangers. These guardians patrol the accessible tunnels, identifying and sealing breaches before they can compromise the network's integrity, while mapping the ever-changing configuration of passages that shift according to the currents of psychic energy flowing through the immaterium. The work proves both dangerous and essential, as the loss of additional webway sections would further isolate the scattered Craftworlds from one another. Wraithbone technology forms the foundation of Asuryani civilization, representing a perfect fusion of psychic manipulation and material engineering that allows for the creation of structures and devices that respond directly to mental commands. This remarkable substance begins as a form of psychically active coral that grows in specialized chambers within the Craftworlds, its molecular structure shaped by the focused thoughts and emotions of skilled bonesingers who guide its development through careful mental discipline. The process requires years of training to master, as the bone shaper must maintain perfect concentration while visualizing the desired end result in precise detail. The growth process itself resembles organic development more than conventional manufacturing, with the wraithbone extending itself through branching patterns that follow the psychic blueprints provided by its shapers. The material possesses an inherent responsiveness to Asuryani mental patterns, allowing it to adapt its properties according to the specific requirements of each application. Structural wraithbone used in Craftworld construction develops greater density and strength, while wraithbone intended for weapons or equipment maintains the flexibility necessary for complex mechanical functions. The psycho-responsive properties of wraithbone extend beyond simple obedience to mental commands to encompass a form of limited consciousness that allows the material to anticipate the needs of its users. Wraithbone structures can adjust their internal configuration to optimize performance, while weapons crafted from the material can modify their characteristics to suit different combat situations. This adaptability makes wraithbone technology superior to conventional materials in almost every application, though it requires constant psychic maintenance to prevent degradation of its responsive properties. The techniques used by bonesingers to shape wraithbone involve a complex combination of meditation, visualization, and direct psychic manipulation that transforms the raw material into finished products through pure mental force. The process begins with the bone shaper entering a trance state that allows their consciousness to interface directly with the Wraithbone's psychic matrix, their thoughts becoming the template that guides the material's transformation. The most skilled practitioners can work with multiple pieces simultaneously, their enhanced mental capacity allowing them to maintain separate visualization patterns for different projects while coordinating their development to ensure compatibility. The tools used in Wraithbone shaping are themselves crafted from the same material, creating implements that respond to the user's mental commands while amplifying their natural psychic abilities. These tools range from simple focusing crystals that help maintain concentration during extended shaping sessions to complex psychic amplifiers that allow bonesingers to work with larger quantities of material or achieve more precise results. The most sophisticated tools incorporate multiple layers of psychic matrices that can store and replay successful shaping patterns, allowing apprentice bonesingers to learn from the experiences of their masters. The applications of Wraithbone technology encompass virtually every aspect of Asuryani civilization, from the massive structural elements that form the Craftworld's hulls to the delicate components that make up their most advanced weapons and equipment. The material's versatility allows it to serve functions that would require multiple different substances in conventional technology, its properties adapting to meet the specific requirements of each application. Wraithbone armor provides protection that rivals the best ceramite while remaining light enough to allow for unrestricted movement, while Wraithbone weapons can channel psychic energy to enhance their effectiveness beyond what purely physical implements could achieve. The grav tank technology that defines Asuryani armored warfare represents a sophisticated application of anti-gravity principles that allows their vehicles to hover above the battlefield while maintaining the firepower and protection necessary for effective combat. The gravitic drive systems incorporated into these vehicles manipulate local gravitational fields to provide both propulsion and lift, their operation requiring no physical contact with the ground while generating minimal noise or thermal signature. This technology allows Asuryani armor to traverse terrain that would prove impassable to conventional tracked or wheeled vehicles, while their ability to adjust altitude provides tactical advantages that ground-bound opponents cannot match. The Wave Serpent serves as the primary troop transport for Asuryani forces, its sleek hull incorporating advanced gravitic technology that allows it to skim across the battlefield at high speed while carrying a full squad of warriors. The vehicle's design emphasizes protection and mobility over raw firepower, though its twin-linked weapon systems provide adequate fire support for the troops it carries. The Wave Serpent's most distinctive feature is its energy field projector, a defensive system that creates a protective barrier around the vehicle by converting incoming weapons fire into harmless energy that dissipates harmlessly into the surrounding environment. The Falcon Grav Tank represents the backbone of Asuryani armored forces, combining the mobility of anti-gravity propulsion with the firepower necessary to engage enemy armor on equal terms. The vehicle's primary armament consists of a scatter laser or star cannon, weapons capable of engaging both infantry and armored targets with equal effectiveness. The Falcon's crew compartment can accommodate a small squad of aspect warriors, allowing the vehicle to serve as both a battle taxi and a mobile fire support platform that can adapt to changing tactical requirements. The Fire Prism tank specializes in long-range fire support, its prism cannon capable of engaging targets at extreme distances with devastating accuracy. The weapon operates by focusing laser energy through a series of psychically active crystals, creating a beam that can be adjusted for different effects depending on the tactical situation. The prism cannon can fire focused beams for precision strikes against specific targets or dispersed energy bursts that can eliminate entire infantry formations. The tank's advanced targeting systems incorporate psychic enhancement that allows the crew to engage targets that would be beyond the range of conventional sensors. The Night Spinner provides indirect fire support through its Doomweaver weapon, a specialized system that launches webs of monofilament wire capable of slicing through armor and flesh with equal ease. The vehicle's role on the battlefield emphasizes area denial and the elimination of infantry formations, its weapons creating killing zones that enemy forces cannot safely traverse. The Night Spinner's gravitic drive allows it to reposition quickly after firing, preventing enemy forces from targeting it through counter-battery fire, while maintaining the mobility necessary for effective hit-and-run tactics. Jetbike technology represents the pinnacle of Asuryani personal mobility, combining anti-gravity propulsion with sophisticated control systems that allow individual warriors to achieve flight capabilities that rival dedicated aircraft. The jet bikes used by Asuryani forces incorporate the same gravitic principles that power their larger vehicles, though the reduced size and weight of these personal transports allows for greater agility and responsiveness. The bikes respond directly to their riders' mental commands, their control systems interfacing with the pilot's nervous system to provide instantaneous response to changes in direction or speed. The Windrider jet bikes used by Guardian squadrons provide basic transportation and fire support capabilities, their twin-linked shuriken catapults offering adequate firepower for reconnaissance and harassment missions. The bike's design emphasizes reliability and ease of maintenance over raw performance, making them suitable for use by citizen soldiers who lack the extensive training required for more sophisticated vehicles. The Windrider's gravitic drive provides sufficient speed and maneuverability for most tactical situations, while remaining stable enough for inexperienced pilots to operate safely. The Shining Spear jet bikes represent a more advanced application of the technology, their enhanced performance characteristics allowing them to serve as cavalry units capable of engaging enemy forces in close combat. These bikes incorporate more powerful gravitic drives that provide greater speed and acceleration, while their reinforced construction allows them to withstand the stresses of high-speed combat maneuvers. The Shining Spear's rider carries a laser lance, a weapon that combines the functions of a power weapon and a ranged laser, making it effective in both mounted charges and sustained combat. The Viper jet bike serves as a fast attack platform, its twin crew configuration allowing one warrior to pilot while the other operates the vehicle's heavy weapon systems. The Viper's role on the battlefield emphasizes reconnaissance and harassment, its speed and agility allowing it to engage enemy forces and withdraw before they can respond effectively. The vehicle's weapons loadout can be customized for different missions, with options ranging from anti-infantry scatter lasers to anti-armor bright lances that can threaten even the heaviest enemy vehicles. The decline of technological knowledge since the fall has created significant challenges for the Asuryani, as many of the most advanced techniques and manufacturing processes were lost when the core worlds were consumed by the Eye of Terror. The Craftworlds that survived the catastrophe carried with them only a fraction of their ancestors' accumulated knowledge, much of it stored in the memories of individuals who perished during the chaotic evacuation. The surviving technical documentation often proved incomplete or incomprehensible without the context provided by the master craftsmen who had created it, leaving later generations to puzzle out the principles behind technologies they could no longer fully understand. The Bonesingers who maintain the Craftworld's ancient artifacts represent the primary guardians of technological knowledge, their role extending beyond simple maintenance to encompass the preservation and transmission of manufacturing techniques that would otherwise be lost forever. These skilled artisans spend decades studying individual pieces of equipment, learning to replicate their construction through careful analysis of their psychic matrices and material composition. The process proves both time-consuming and dangerous, as attempts to reverse engineer ancient technology can result in catastrophic failures that destroy irreplaceable artifacts. The apprenticeship system used to train new Bonesingers ensures that knowledge is passed down through direct instruction rather than written documentation, creating a living repository of technical expertise that adapts to changing circumstances while preserving essential techniques. Master Bonesingers take on small numbers of students, teaching them through hands-on experience with actual artifacts rather than theoretical instruction. This approach ensures that each generation of craftsmen develops practical skills that can be applied to real-world problems, though it also means that knowledge is lost whenever a master dies before completing their students' training. The most critical artifacts maintained by the Bonesingers include the Craftworld's core systems, whose failure would result in the death of entire populations. These ancient mechanisms operate according to principles that predate the fall, their construction incorporating technologies that the current generation of Asuryani can maintain but not replicate. The Bonesingers who work on these systems must exercise extreme caution, as any mistake could cause irreparable damage to equipment that cannot be replaced. The psychological pressure of this responsibility weighs heavily on these artisans, who understand that their skills are all that stand between their people and extinction. The process of maintaining ancient technology requires specialized tools and techniques that have been adapted to work with equipment whose original specifications are no longer fully understood. Bonesingers have developed diagnostic methods that rely on psychic perception rather than conventional instrumentation, allowing them to detect problems within complex systems by sensing the flow of energy through their components. These techniques prove more art than science, requiring intuitive understanding of how different technologies interact rather than precise knowledge of their operating principles. The workshops where Bonesingers practice their craft are located in the deepest sections of the Craftworlds, surrounded by layers of psychic shielding that protect both the artisans and their work from external interference. These facilities contain collections of ancient tools and reference materials that have been accumulated over thousands of years, their value measured not in monetary terms, but in the irreplaceable knowledge they represent. The workshops themselves are works of art, their wraithbone construction shaped to optimize the flow of psychic energy while providing the stable environment necessary for precision work. The challenge of maintaining technological capability while lacking complete understanding of underlying principles has forced the Asuryani to develop conservative approaches to equipment modification and repair. Rather than attempting to improve upon ancient designs, Bonesingers focus on preserving existing functionality while making minimal changes that reduce the risk of catastrophic failure. This approach has allowed the Craftworlds to maintain their technological edge over younger races, though it has also limited their ability to adapt to new threats that require technological solutions their ancestors never anticipated. The relationship between Bonesingers and the Craftworld's infinity circuits creates unique opportunities for preserving technological knowledge, as the souls of deceased artisans can be consulted for guidance on particularly challenging projects. These ancestral spirits retain their technical expertise even after death, their consciousness preserved within the Craftworld's psychic network, where it can be accessed by living Bonesingers who encounter problems beyond their current understanding. The process of communicating with the dead requires considerable skill and carries significant risks, as prolonged contact with the infinity circuit can result in the living artisan's consciousness becoming trapped within the network. The most desperate measure available to the Asuryani involves the animation of their fallen warriors through the creation of wraith constructs, towering war machines that house the souls of the dead within bodies of living bone and psychically active metals. This practice represents a profound violation of the natural order that the Asuryani undertake only when facing extinction, as disturbing the peaceful rest of their ancestors carries spiritual and psychological consequences that can haunt the living for generations. The process requires the consent of the deceased, whose souls must be coaxed from their eternal contemplation within the infinity circuit and convinced to take up arms once more in defense of their people. The creation of wraith constructs begins with the careful selection of suitable candidates from among the Craftworld's ancestral spirits, a process that requires extensive consultation with the infinity circuit to identify souls whose martial expertise and psychological stability make them capable of functioning within artificial bodies. The spirit seers responsible for this selection must navigate the complex web of relationships that exist within the circuit, as the souls of the dead maintain their connections to family members and comrades whose opinions can influence their willingness to return to the physical realm. The process proves emotionally taxing for all involved, as it requires the living to confront the reality of their own mortality, while asking their ancestors to abandon their peaceful existence for the brutal necessity of war. Wraithguard represent the most common form of these constructs, their humanoid forms standing nearly 3 meters tall and possessing the bulk necessary to house both the sophisticated systems required for their operation and the spirit stone that contains their animating consciousness. The construction process begins with the growth of a wraithbone skeleton that serves as the framework for the construct's body, its internal structure incorporating channels and chambers that will house the various systems necessary for independent operation. The bonesingers who shape these forms must work with extraordinary precision, as any flaw in the basic structure will compromise the construct's effectiveness while potentially causing psychological trauma to the soul that will inhabit it. The wraithbone used in construct creation differs significantly from the material employed in conventional Asuryani technology, its molecular structure modified to accommodate the unique requirements of housing a disembodied consciousness. This specialized variant, known as spirit bone, incorporates crystalline matrices that can interface directly with the psychic emanations from spirit stones while maintaining the structural integrity necessary for combat operations. The process of growing spirit bone requires the constant attention of skilled bonesingers who must maintain perfect concentration while visualizing the complex internal geometries that will allow the finished construct to function properly. The integration of the spirit stone into the construct's body represents the most critical phase of the creation process, as the soul's consciousness must be carefully transferred from the infinity circuit into its new physical vessel without causing psychological damage that could render the construct inoperable. The spirit seers who oversee this procedure must establish a psychic link with the chosen soul, gradually drawing its attention away from the eternal contemplation that characterizes existence within the circuit and focusing it on the immediate concerns of the physical world. This process can take days or even weeks to complete, as the soul must be given time to adjust to its new circumstances without being overwhelmed by the sudden return of physical sensation. The weapon systems incorporated into Wraithguard reflect their role as elite heavy infantry, their wraith cannons capable of firing focused streams of psychic energy that can tear through the heaviest armor or reduce enemy fortifications to rubble. These weapons operate by channeling the construct's animating spirit through crystalline focusing, arrays that convert psychic energy into destructive force, their effectiveness limited only by the soul's willpower and the quality of the focusing crystals used in their construction. The Wraith Cannon's distinctive appearance, with its organic curves and crystalline components, makes it instantly recognizable on the battlefield, while its devastating firepower ensures that enemy forces treat Wraithguard formations with appropriate respect. The alternative armament available to Wraithguard units consists of D-sides, weapons that manipulate dimensional space to create localized distortions that can tear apart matter at the molecular level. These devices operate by generating controlled rifts in reality that cause targeted areas to experience violent dimensional flux, their effects proving equally devastating against organic and mechanical targets. The D-side's relatively short range compared to the Wraith Cannon makes it more suitable for close-quarters combat, though its ability to ignore conventional armor makes it particularly effective against heavily protected enemies. Wraith blades represent a more aggressive variant of the basic construct design, their bodies optimized for close combat operations that require greater speed and agility than the standard Wraithguard configuration. These constructs carry melee weapons that channel their animating spirit's energy through crystalline matrices, creating power fields that can slice through virtually any material while generating psychic disruption that affects enemy morale and coordination. The Wraith swords wielded by most Wraith blades incorporate sophisticated power field generators that respond to the construct's mental commands, allowing the weapon's characteristics to be adjusted for different combat situations. The alternative armament for Wraith blades consists of ghost axes paired with foresaw shields, a combination that provides both offensive capability and defensive protection suitable for sustained close combat. The Ghost Axe's broad blade incorporates multiple power field generators that create overlapping energy fields capable of cleaving through the heaviest armor, while its psychic resonance matrix generates fear effects that can cause enemy formations to break and flee. The Force's shield provides protection against both ranged and melee attacks, its energy field deflecting incoming projectiles, while its psychic components create interference that disrupts enemy targeting systems. The psychological impact of Wraith Blades extends beyond their physical combat capabilities to encompass the terror that their presence generates among enemy forces who must face the prospect of fighting the vengeful dead. The construct's movements possess an otherworldly quality that distinguishes them from living warriors, their actions guided by consciousness that no longer experiences fear or doubt, while retaining the tactical knowledge accumulated over lifetimes of combat experience. This combination of supernatural presence and lethal effectiveness makes Wraithblades particularly valuable for assault operations, where enemy morale must be broken quickly to prevent organized resistance. Wraithlords represent the largest and most powerful of the standard Wraith constructs, their massive forms towering over the battlefield, while housing the souls of great warriors and leaders whose tactical expertise and combat experience make them ideal candidates for command roles. The construction of a Wraithlord requires significantly more resources than smaller constructs, as their bodies must accommodate multiple weapon systems while maintaining the structural integrity necessary for sustained combat operations. The process of creating these massive constructs can take months or even years to complete, as every component must be crafted with extraordinary precision to ensure optimal performance. The selection of souls suitable for Wraithlord bodies focuses on individuals whose leadership abilities and strategic understanding make them capable of coordinating complex military operations while maintaining the psychological stability necessary for independent command. These candidates typically include former autarchs, veteran exarchs, or other military leaders whose expertise transcends simple combat skills to encompass the broader understanding of warfare required for effective battlefield command. The process of convincing these souls to return to physical existence proves particularly challenging, as their elevated status within the Infinity Circuit makes them reluctant to abandon their spiritual responsibilities for the crude necessities of war. The weapon systems available to Wraithlords reflect their role as heavy support units capable of engaging multiple target types with devastating effectiveness. The standard configuration includes a Wraith cannon for anti-armor work and a Flamespurt cannon for eliminating infantry formations, though alternative loadouts allow for specialization in specific combat roles. The Bright Lance provides long-range anti-armor capability that can threaten even the heaviest enemy vehicles, while the Scatter Laser offers high-volume fire suitable for suppressing enemy infantry or engaging lightly armored targets. The close combat capabilities of Wraithlords center around their massive Wraith Swords, weapons that combine the functions of power weapons and psychic focuses to create implements of devastating effectiveness. These enormous blades incorporate power field generators that can slice through ceramite armor, while their psychic matrices channel the construct's animating spirit to generate fear effects that can paralyze enemy forces. The Wraith Sword's size and weight make it unsuitable for use by living warriors, though the Wraithlord's supernatural strength allows it to wield these weapons with fluid grace that belies their massive proportions. Wraith Knights represent the pinnacle of Wraith construct technology, their towering forms standing as tall as Imperial Titans, while possessing the agility and responsiveness that only psychic animation can provide. These massive war machines house the souls of the greatest heroes in Craftworld history, individuals whose legendary status and extraordinary abilities make them suitable for controlling constructs of such immense power and complexity. The creation of a Wraith Knight requires the combined efforts of an entire Craftworld's Bonesingers and Spirit Seers, their construction representing a commitment of resources that can only be justified by the most desperate circumstances. The selection process for Wraith Knight pilots focuses on souls whose heroic deeds and leadership abilities have elevated them to legendary status within their Craftworld's collective memory. These individuals often include the founders of aspect shrines, legendary autarchs who led their people through great victories, or farseers whose prophetic abilities saved their Craftworld from destruction. The process of convincing these exalted souls to return to physical existence requires extensive negotiation and persuasion, as their elevated status within the Infinity Circuit makes them reluctant to abandon their spiritual responsibilities for the necessities of war. The weapon systems available to Wraith Knights reflect their role as strategic assets capable of engaging the most dangerous enemy forces while providing fire support for entire army groups. The Sun Cannon serves as the primary anti-armor weapon, its focused energy beam capable of destroying enemy vehicles at extreme range, while its psychic guidance systems ensure devastating accuracy. The Ghostglaive provides close combat capability that allows the Wraith Knight to engage enemy titans and other super heavy units in melee combat, its massive blade incorporating power field generators that can slice through the heaviest armor. The scatter shield carried by most Wraith Knights provides protection against enemy fire while incorporating weapon systems that allow the construct to engage multiple targets simultaneously. The shield's energy field can deflect incoming projectiles, while its integrated scatter laser provides suppressive fire that can eliminate enemy infantry formations. The combination of offensive and defensive capabilities makes the scatter shield an essential component of the Wraith Knight's equipment, allowing it to advance across open ground while maintaining effective fire against enemy positions. The psychological and spiritual implications of creating Wraith constructs extend far beyond the immediate tactical advantages they provide, as the process of disturbing the dead creates moral dilemmas that can divide Craftworld populations and strain the relationship between the living and their ancestors. The souls housed within the Infinity Circuit exist in a state of peaceful contemplation that represents the closest approximation to paradise that the Asuryani can achieve, their consciousness freed from the physical limitations and emotional turmoil that characterize mortal existence. The decision to recall these souls to the harsh realities of war represents a profound violation of their right to eternal rest, a choice that can only be justified by the threat of complete extinction. The process of convincing ancestral spirits to animate Wraith constructs requires extensive negotiation and persuasion, as the souls must be made to understand the gravity of the situation that necessitates their return to physical existence. The spirit seers who conduct these negotiations must present compelling arguments that demonstrate the immediate threat to the Craftworld, while respecting the autonomy of the spirits they seek to recruit. The souls retain their individual personalities and decision-making capabilities, making it impossible to compel their cooperation through force or manipulation. The ethical debates surrounding the use of Wraith constructs often center on the question of whether the living have the right to disturb the eternal rest of their ancestors, regardless of the circumstances that prompt such desperate measures. Conservative elements within Craftworld society argue that the practice represents a fundamental violation of the natural order that degrades the spiritual purity of both the living and the dead, while pragmatists contend that survival takes precedence over abstract moral principles. These debates can become particularly heated when the proposed animation involves the souls of revered ancestors whose spiritual status makes them objects of veneration rather than merely deceased relatives. The reluctance of most Craftworld populations to employ Wraith constructs, except in the most dire circumstances, reflects both practical and spiritual considerations that make these weapons of last resort rather than routine military assets. The resources required to create and maintain Wraith constructs represent a significant drain on Craftworld capabilities, as the specialized materials and skilled artisans needed for their construction could be employed for other purposes that might prove more beneficial in the long term. The psychological impact on the living population must also be considered, as the presence of animated corpses can create an atmosphere of morbid desperation that undermines morale and social cohesion. The maintenance requirements for Wraith constructs create ongoing challenges, that extend far beyond the initial construction process, as the artificial bodies require constant attention from skilled bonesingers who must monitor their structural integrity while ensuring that the psychic systems remain properly calibrated. The spirit stones that house the animating consciousness must be regularly checked for signs of degradation or contamination, as any damage to these crucial components could result in the loss of the soul they contain. The psychological well-being of the animated spirits must also be monitored, as the transition from peaceful contemplation to active warfare can cause trauma that manifests as behavioral irregularities or combat ineffectiveness. The battlefield performance of Wraith constructs reflects both their supernatural capabilities and the limitations imposed by their artificial nature, as the souls that animate them must adapt to bodies that lack the sensory capabilities and intuitive responses of living flesh. The construct's movements often appear slightly mechanical or delayed compared to those of living warriors, as their animating consciousness must consciously control functions that would be automatic in organic bodies. This limitation becomes particularly apparent during complex maneuvers that require precise timing and coordination, though the construct's supernatural strength and durability often compensate for their reduced agility. The tactical deployment of Wraith constructs requires careful consideration of their unique capabilities and limitations, as their supernatural nature makes them particularly effective against certain types of enemies while potentially vulnerable to others. The construct's immunity to fear and other psychological effects makes them ideal for operations against enemies who rely on terror tactics, while their resistance to conventional weapons allows them to advance through fire that would devastate living troops. However, their reliance on psychic animation makes them vulnerable to anti-psychic weapons and abilities that can disrupt their controlling consciousness. The long-term consequences of employing Wraith constructs extend beyond the immediate tactical situation to encompass the broader relationship between Craftworld society and the spiritual realm that sustains it. The repeated animation of ancestral spirits can gradually deplete the Infinity Circuit's population of suitable candidates, as souls that have been recalled to physical existence multiple times may suffer psychological damage that makes them unsuitable for future animation. The cumulative effect of these losses can weaken the Craftworld's spiritual foundation while reducing the pool of ancestral wisdom available to guide future generations. The Asuryani understanding of fate transcends the crude concept of predetermined destiny that characterizes the beliefs of younger races, instead encompassing a sophisticated comprehension of causality that views the future as an infinite web of interconnected possibilities. This metaphysical framework, known as the skein of fate, represents the accumulated wisdom of millions of years of psychic evolution, refined through the desperate necessity of survival in a galaxy where every decision carries the potential for species-wide extinction. The farseers who interpret this cosmic tapestry perceive reality as a vast network of glowing threads, each strand representing a sequence of cause and effect that extends from the distant past into the far future, their intersections marking moments where individual choices can alter the course of galactic history. The complexity of this system defies comprehension by non-psychic minds, as the skein encompasses not merely the actions of individuals, but the collective unconscious of entire species, the movements of stellar bodies, and the chaotic fluctuations of the warp itself. Each thread within the web carries information about probability rather than certainty, its brightness indicating the likelihood of specific outcomes, while its connections to other strands reveal the cascading consequences that flow from particular decisions. The most skilled farseers learn to perceive patterns within this chaos, identifying critical junctures where minimal intervention can produce maximum effect, while avoiding the paradoxes that arise from attempting to alter events they have already witnessed. The practice of divination among the Asuryani requires extraordinary mental discipline, as the Seer must maintain awareness of multiple contradictory possibilities without allowing the paradoxes to fragment their consciousness. The process begins with the casting of Wraithbone runes, each symbol serving as a focus for specific aspects of the divination, while providing a framework for interpreting the visions that follow. The Farseer enters a trance state that allows their consciousness to expand beyond normal temporal boundaries, their awareness encompassing past, present, and future simultaneously, while searching for the threads of causality that connect current circumstances to potential outcomes. The interpretation of prophetic visions proves as challenging as their reception, as the symbolic language employed by the unconscious mind often obscures rather than clarifies the information being conveyed. The same vision might represent literal future events, metaphorical warnings about potential dangers, or psychological projections of the seer's own fears and desires. The most experienced Farseers develop sophisticated techniques for distinguishing between different types of prophetic information, though even they acknowledge that absolute certainty remains impossible when dealing with the fluid nature of temporal possibility. The concept of self-fulfilling prophecy creates particular challenges for Asuryani seers, as their attempts to prevent predicted catastrophes can inadvertently cause the very events they seek to avoid. The classical example involves the Farseer who perceives a vision of their Craftworld's destruction and takes action to prevent it, only to discover that their intervention creates the circumstances that make the catastrophe inevitable. This paradox has led to the development of sophisticated philosophical frameworks that attempt to reconcile the desire to act on prophetic knowledge with the recognition that such action can corrupt the very foundations of prescient ability. The Rana Dandra represents the ultimate expression of Asuryani prophetic tradition, a vision of the final battle that will determine whether order or chaos prevails in the galaxy's ultimate fate. This prophecy, first articulated by the greatest seers of the pre-fall era, describes a cosmic conflict that will encompass every inhabited world and involve every sentient species in a struggle that transcends mere territorial or ideological disputes. The vision depicts reality itself as the battlefield, with the fundamental forces of creation and destruction locked in combat that will either preserve the universe's structure or allow it to dissolve into primordial chaos. The prophecy's imagery draws heavily from the mythology of the ancient Aeldari pantheon, describing the return of their gods to do battle with the forces of chaos in a conflict that will dwarf even the catastrophic events surrounding Slaanesh's birth. The vision shows Kain reassembled from his scattered fragments, his divine form restored to its original power as he leads the forces of order against the chaos gods themselves. Isha appears freed from Nurgle's garden, her healing powers working to restore the damage inflicted by millennia of warfare and corruption. Even Segorach emerges from the webway's depths, his cosmic jest revealing the ultimate punchline that will either save or damn the galaxy. The role of the Inari in potentially altering these ancient prophecies represents one of the most significant developments in Asuryani theology since the fall, as their efforts to awaken Ennead challenge fundamental assumptions about the nature of fate and the possibility of changing predetermined outcomes. The emergence of this new faction, led by visionaries who claim direct communication with the nascent god of the dead, has created schisms within Craftworld society that reflect deeper philosophical disagreements about the relationship between prophecy and free will. Traditional Farseers argue that the ancient visions remain valid regardless of recent developments, while Inari supporters contend that the awakening of their god represents a fundamental shift in the cosmic order that invalidates previous prophetic frameworks. The theological implications of Ennead's emergence extend far beyond simple questions of prophetic accuracy to encompass the fundamental nature of Asuryani existence in the post-fall galaxy. The traditional understanding of their species' fate involved gradual extinction as Slaanesh slowly consumed their souls, with the best possible outcome being a dignified decline that preserved their cultural achievements for future generations to study. The Inari vision offers the possibility of genuine renewal, with Ennead's power potentially breaking the cycle of spiritual predation that has defined Asuryani existence for 10,000 years. The process of awakening Ennead requires the voluntary sacrifice of Asuryani souls, a practice that horrifies traditional Craftworld populations while attracting those who view it as the only path to genuine salvation. The Aeldari argue that these sacrifices serve a greater purpose by strengthening their god's presence in the material realm, each death contributing to the accumulated power necessary for Ennead to challenge Slaanesh directly. The theological debates surrounding this practice center on whether the living have the right to sacrifice themselves for hypothetical future benefits, particularly when the promised salvation remains unproven and the immediate costs prove devastating to already diminished populations. The Ungkarn, the avatar of Ennead, represents the most tangible evidence of the new god's growing power, its manifestations during critical battles demonstrating capabilities that seem to validate Inari claims about their deity's potential. This entity appears as a towering figure wreathed in spectral flames, its form shifting between the appearance of different Asuryani who have contributed their souls to Ennead's awakening. The Ungkarn's presence on the battlefield creates zones of supernatural terror that affect both allies and enemies, its power over death and rebirth allowing it to resurrect fallen warriors while simultaneously draining the life force from enemy combatants. The tactical implications of the Ungkarn's abilities have forced traditional military planners to reconsider their understanding of battlefield dynamics, as the entity's power to manipulate the boundary between life and death creates opportunities and challenges that conventional doctrine cannot address. The Avatar's ability to appear anywhere that Asuryani have died in significant numbers makes it an unpredictable strategic asset, while its tendency to manifest during moments of greatest crisis means that its interventions often occur when traditional forces have already been overwhelmed. The psychological impact of witnessing the dead return to fight alongside the living creates morale effects that can either inspire desperate courage or paralyze troops with existential terror. The relationship between traditional Asuryani prophecy and their interactions with humanity reflects the complex web of causality that connects the fates of both species across the millennia. The ancient visions perceived by Aeldari seers during the height of their empire included glimpses of the Moan Keith, as they termed the primitive humans who would eventually inherit the galaxy. These early prophecies depicted humanity as both a potential ally and a dangerous threat, their psychic potential marking them as either salvation or damnation, depending on the choices made by key individuals at critical moments in their development. The emergence of the Emperor of Mankind represented a significant validation of ancient Asuryani prophecy, as his appearance matched descriptions found in texts that predated human civilization by millions of years. The seers who had witnessed visions of this figure described him as a being of immense psychic power, whose actions would determine whether humanity became a force for order or chaos in the galaxy's future. The Emperor's creation of the Primarchs and his subsequent efforts to unite humanity under the banner of the Great Crusade fulfilled many of the specific predictions contained in these ancient texts, though the ultimate outcome remained uncertain, as the visions showed multiple possible futures branching from his actions. The Horus Heresy validated the darkest aspects of these prophecies, as the civil war that tore the Imperium apart created exactly the conditions that the ancient seers had warned would lead to humanity's corruption by chaos. The Asuryani who witnessed these events reported that they unfolded with disturbing fidelity to the prophetic visions, though the specific details often differed from the symbolic imagery that had been recorded in their sacred texts. The establishment of the Imperium's current theocratic structure represented a deviation from the predicted outcomes, as the ancient visions had shown humanity either achieving enlightenment or falling completely to chaos rather than maintaining the precarious balance that characterizes the current age. The ongoing relationship between Asuryani farseers and imperial authorities reflects the complex interplay between prophetic knowledge and political necessity that defines interactions between the two species. The seers' ability to perceive threats before they fully manifest makes them valuable allies for imperial commanders who must defend against enemies that conventional intelligence cannot detect, while their understanding of chaos corruption allows them to identify tainted individuals before they can cause significant damage. However, the Imperium's xenophobic ideology creates constant tension with Asuryani forces, as cooperation with aliens represents heresy according to Imperial doctrine regardless of the practical benefits such alliances might provide. The specific instances of cooperation between Asuryani and Imperial forces often involve situations where the threat posed by chaos or other enemies transcends the normal boundaries of species loyalty, creating temporary alliances that dissolve once the immediate danger has passed. The farseers who orchestrate these collaborations must navigate complex webs of causality to ensure that their interventions produce the desired outcomes without creating new problems that might prove even more dangerous than the original threats. The delicate nature of these manipulations requires extraordinary skill and patience, as the Seers must often work through intermediaries and indirect influence rather than direct communication with Imperial authorities. The prophetic traditions surrounding the 13th Black Crusade demonstrated the complexity of Asuryani involvement in human affairs, as multiple Craftworld Seer councils contributed their visions to a collective understanding of the threat posed by Abaddon's forces. The assembled prophecies painted a picture of potential catastrophe that extended far beyond the immediate military objectives of the Chaos forces, revealing connections between the Crusade and cosmic events that would affect the entire galaxy. The Farseer's warnings about the true nature of Abaddon's goals proved instrumental in preparing defenses that might otherwise have been overwhelmed, though the full extent of their contributions remains hidden from Imperial records. The emergence of the Great Rift has created new challenges for Asuryani prophets, as the massive warp storm has disrupted the normal flow of causality that their divination techniques depend upon. The psychic interference generated by the rift creates blind spots in the skein of fate that prevent seers from perceiving events occurring on the far side of the galaxy, while the chaotic energies it emits can corrupt prophetic visions with false information that leads to catastrophic miscalculations. The farseers who attempt to peer through this interference report experiencing visions of impossible events and contradictory timelines that suggest the fundamental nature of reality itself has been altered by the rift's presence. The theological implications of these disruptions extend beyond simple technical challenges to encompass questions about the nature of fate itself and whether the ancient frameworks for understanding cosmic destiny remain valid in the current age. Some Asuryani philosophers argue that the Great Rift represents a fundamental break in the cosmic order that invalidates all previous prophetic traditions, while others contend that the disruptions are temporary phenomena that will eventually resolve themselves as the galaxy adapts to its new configuration. The debate has practical implications for military planning and resource allocation, as different interpretations of the current situation lead to radically different strategic recommendations. The role of the Harlequins in preserving and interpreting prophetic traditions adds another layer of complexity to Asuryani understanding of fate, as these servants of Segorach possess access to information sources that remain hidden from conventional seers. The Harlequins' performances often contain prophetic elements that provide warnings about future events, though their symbolic nature makes interpretation challenging even for experienced farseers. The troop masters who create these performances claim to receive inspiration directly from the Laughing God, whose perspective on cosmic events transcends the limitations that constrain mortal understanding of temporal causality. The increasing frequency of Harlequin interventions in Craftworld affairs suggests that Segorach's attention has been drawn to current events in ways that may indicate approaching fulfillment of ancient prophecies. The god's servants have begun appearing at critical moments with increasing regularity, their performances providing guidance that helps Craftworld forces navigate challenges that would otherwise prove insurmountable. The specific nature of these interventions often involves revealing hidden connections between seemingly unrelated events, allowing Asuryani commanders to anticipate enemy actions and position their forces for maximum effectiveness. The relationship between different prophetic traditions within Asuryani society creates ongoing tensions that reflect broader philosophical disagreements about the nature of fate and free will. The orthodox interpretation maintained by most Craftworld Seer councils emphasizes the importance of accepting predetermined outcomes while working within the constraints of cosmic necessity, while more radical elements argue for active intervention to change the course of events regardless of prophetic warnings. These debates have intensified in recent centuries as the galaxy has experienced unprecedented upheavals that challenge traditional assumptions about the stability of cosmic order. The practical implications of these philosophical differences manifest in strategic disagreements about how to respond to emerging threats and opportunities. Conservative farseers advocate for defensive strategies that minimize risk while accepting gradual decline as the inevitable fate of their species, while progressive elements push for aggressive interventions that might alter the fundamental trajectory of galactic history. The tension between these approaches creates internal conflicts within Craftworld society that can paralyze decision-making processes at critical moments when rapid action might prevent catastrophic outcomes. The 41st millennium has witnessed the Asuryani emerge from their self-imposed isolation with increasing frequency, their interventions in galactic affairs driven by prophetic visions that reveal threats capable of consuming not just their own species, but the entire galaxy. The complex web of conflicts that defines this dark age has forced the surviving Craftworlds to abandon their traditional reluctance to engage with younger races, creating temporary alliances that would have been unthinkable during the millennia immediately following the fall. These partnerships, born from desperate necessity rather than genuine trust, reflect the Asuryani's pragmatic acceptance that their survival depends upon maintaining the delicate balance of power that prevents any single faction from achieving total dominance. The Gothic War demonstrated the Asuryani's willingness to intervene in human conflicts when the outcomes threatened their own interests, their fleets appearing without warning to strike at chaos forces that had penetrated too deeply into sectors containing hidden webway gates. The Craftworld Ulthwé took the most active role in these operations, their proximity to the Eye of Terror providing them with advance warning of Abaddon's movements, while their extensive network of rangers gathered intelligence about chaos fleet dispositions throughout the Gothic sector. The Asuryani strikes followed their traditional pattern of surgical precision, targeting specific vessels whose destruction would cripple entire enemy formations, while avoiding the prolonged engagements that might result in unacceptable casualties to their own forces. The coordination between Asuryani and Imperial forces during the Gothic War required delicate diplomatic maneuvering, as direct cooperation remained impossible due to the Imperium's xenophobic policies. Instead, the Craftworld fleets operated independently while sharing intelligence through intermediaries and coordinating their attacks to support Imperial operations without appearing to collaborate openly. The Asuryani commanders demonstrated their understanding of human psychology by timing their interventions to appear as opportunistic strikes against weakened chaos forces rather than coordinated support for Imperial objectives, allowing both sides to maintain their ideological positions while achieving practical cooperation. The effectiveness of these tactics became apparent during the Battle of Gethsemane, where Ulthwé's fleet appeared just as Admiral Ravensburg's forces were on the verge of defeat, their precise strikes eliminating the chaos vessels that had broken through the Imperial battle line. The Asuryani attack focused on the enemy flagship, their concentrated firepower overwhelming its void shields and crippling its command systems at the moment when its destruction would cause maximum disruption to the Chaos Fleet's coordination. The timing proved so perfect that Imperial observers suspected advanced planning, though no direct communication between the fleets was ever confirmed. The strategic implications of Asuryani involvement in the Gothic War extended far beyond the immediate tactical benefits, as their interventions prevented Chaos forces from securing several key systems that contained ancient Aeldari ruins. The Craftworld Seers had perceived that these sites contained artifacts and knowledge that could significantly enhance chaos capabilities if they fell into enemy hands, making their protection a priority that transcended normal considerations about avoiding entanglement in human conflicts. The successful defense of these locations preserved secrets that might otherwise have provided Abaddon's forces with the technological advantages needed to achieve total victory in the sector. The 13th Black Crusade represented the largest coordinated effort between Asuryani and Imperial forces in recorded history, though the full extent of their cooperation remained hidden from most participants on both sides. The Craftworld Seer Councils had perceived visions of catastrophic failure that would result from Abaddon's success, their prophecies revealing connections between the Warmaster's objectives and cosmic events that threatened the stability of reality itself. The assembled Farseers contributed their collective wisdom to understanding the true nature of the threat, their combined visions painting a picture of potential disaster that extended far beyond the immediate military objectives of the Chaos Forces. Eldred Ulthwé's personal involvement in the events leading up to the 13th Black Crusade demonstrated the lengths to which the Asuryani would go to prevent outcomes that threatened their species' survival. The ancient Farseer's manipulations spanned decades of careful preparation, as he worked to position key individuals and resources where they would prove most effective against the forces of chaos. His interventions included the subtle guidance of Imperial commanders through intermediaries, the strategic placement of Asuryani forces at critical locations, and the coordination of multiple Craftworld fleets to create a network of mutual support that could respond rapidly to emerging threats. The opening of the Great Rift created unprecedented challenges for Asuryani civilization, as the massive warp storm disrupted the webway network while generating psychic interference that compromised their traditional methods of communication and coordination. The Craftworlds found themselves isolated from one another in ways that had not occurred since the immediate aftermath of the fall, their ability to share intelligence and coordinate responses severely limited by the chaotic energies emanating from the galactic divide. The Farseers who attempted to peer through the psychic static reported experiencing visions of impossible events and contradictory timelines that suggested fundamental alterations to the nature of reality itself. The strategic response to the Great Rift's emergence required each Craftworld to operate with greater independence than they had experienced in millennia, their traditional reliance on collective decision-making replaced by the necessity for rapid local responses to immediate threats. The Seer councils that had previously coordinated their actions across vast distances found themselves forced to make critical decisions based on incomplete information, their prophetic abilities compromised by the interference generated by the Rift's presence. This isolation created opportunities for more aggressive factions within Craftworld society to pursue strategies that might have been rejected by the broader consensus under normal circumstances. The relationship between the Asuryani and their Drukari cousins represents one of the most complex aspects of post-fall Aeldari civilization, as the shared heritage of the ancient empire creates bonds that transcend the philosophical differences that divide the two branches of their species. The Drukari's embrace of the very excesses that led to the fall horrifies the Craftworld Asuryani, yet their common ancestry and mutual vulnerability to Slaanesh's predations create opportunities for cooperation that neither side can entirely ignore. The interactions between these groups typically involve carefully negotiated exchanges of information and resources, with both parties maintaining the fiction that they are exploiting the other, while secretly acknowledging their mutual dependence. The Kimura raids that periodically strike at Craftworld territories create ongoing tensions that complicate any potential alliance between the two Aeldari factions, as the Drukari's need for souls to sustain their unnatural existence makes them natural predators of their more restrained cousins. The Craftworld populations that fall victim to these attacks often include individuals whose skills and knowledge represent irreplaceable resources for their communities, making each successful raid a significant blow to Asuryani capabilities. The psychological impact of these attacks extends beyond the immediate casualties to encompass the constant fear that pervades Craftworld society, as every citizen understands that they might be targeted by their own distant relatives. The occasions when Asuryani and Drukhari forces have cooperated against common enemies demonstrate the potential effectiveness of such alliances, while highlighting the fundamental incompatibilities that prevent permanent cooperation. The most notable examples involve responses to chaos incursions that threaten both factions equally, as the forces of She Who Thirsts represent an existential threat that transcends the normal boundaries of Aeldari politics. During these temporary alliances, the Asuryani provide strategic coordination and psychic support, while the Drukhari contribute their superior numbers and ruthless efficiency in eliminating specific targets. The Inari movement has created new possibilities for cooperation between the two branches of Aeldari civilization, as Ivrain's followers recruit from both Craftworld and Camorra populations, while promoting a vision of renewal that transcends traditional factional boundaries. The emergence of this new faction has forced both Asuryani and Drukhari leadership to reconsider their fundamental assumptions about the nature of their species' fate, as the promise of escape from Slaanish's predations offers hope that neither group had dared to embrace since the fall. The theological implications of Eniad's awakening have created schisms within both communities that cut across traditional lines of authority and allegiance. The military campaigns undertaken by the Asuryani during the 41st millennium reflect their strategic doctrine of achieving maximum effect through minimal expenditure of resources, their interventions typically involving small forces that strike at critical targets rather than large armies that engage in prolonged conflicts. The Craftworld commanders who plan these operations must balance the immediate tactical objectives against the long-term costs of each engagement, as their limited populations cannot sustain the casualty rates that other factions might consider acceptable. This constraint has led to the development of sophisticated analytical techniques that identify the precise points where limited intervention can produce disproportionate results. The Battle of Eandon against Hive Fleet Kraken demonstrated both the effectiveness and the limitations of Asuryani military doctrine when faced with an enemy that could not be defeated through surgical strikes alone. The Tyranid invasion force proved too large and too resilient to be eliminated through the Craftworld's traditional tactics, forcing the defenders to resort to increasingly desperate measures that culminated in the mass activation of Wraith constructs. The Pyrrhic victory that resulted from this battle preserved the Craftworld's physical existence while devastating its population, creating a template for the kind of costly success that the Asuryani could not afford to repeat. The lessons learned from Eandon's ordeal influenced subsequent Asuryani responses to Tyranid threats, as the Craftworld fleets developed new tactics that emphasized prevention over direct confrontation. The Rangers and Pathfinders, who monitor Hive fleet movements, now focus on identifying the bioships and synapse creatures, whose destruction can disrupt entire swarms, while the Craftworld fleets position themselves to strike at these critical targets before the Tyranids can establish their characteristic overwhelming numerical superiority. These preemptive strikes require extraordinary precision and timing, as the window of opportunity for effective intervention typically lasts only hours before the Hive fleet can adapt to the new threat. The Asuryani response to Uruk-Waz demonstrates their understanding of greenskin psychology and their ability to exploit the inherent weaknesses in Orc society to achieve strategic objectives with minimal force commitment. The Craftworld commanders who face Orc invasions typically focus on eliminating the warbosses and other leadership figures, whose death will cause the Wa to fragment into smaller, more manageable groups. The surgical strikes that accomplish these assassinations often involve deep penetration raids by striking scorpions or other specialist units, their stealth capabilities allowing them to reach high-value targets despite the chaotic nature of Orc defensive positions. The coordination between different Asuryani factions during major campaigns requires sophisticated communication networks that can function despite the disruptions caused by warp storms and enemy interference. The Craftworld fleets that participate in these operations typically maintain contact through a combination of webway messengers, psychic communication, and pre-arranged contingency plans that allow for coordination even when direct communication proves impossible. The Farseers who oversee these operations must account for the prophetic visions that guide their strategic planning, while maintaining the flexibility necessary to respond to unexpected developments that their divinations might not have anticipated. The emergence of the Primaris Space Marines and other new Imperial military technologies has forced Asuryani commanders to reassess their understanding of human capabilities and adjust their tactical doctrines accordingly. The enhanced physical capabilities and improved equipment of these new warriors represent a significant upgrade to Imperial military effectiveness, though their tactical doctrine remains largely unchanged from that of their predecessors. The Asuryani analysis of Primaris capabilities has identified both strengths and weaknesses that can be exploited, though the increasing sophistication of Imperial technology suggests that the technological gap between the two species continues to narrow. The strategic implications of the Indomitus Crusade for Asuryani civilization remain unclear, as the massive Imperial expansion effort has both created new opportunities for cooperation and increased the potential for conflict between the two species. The Imperial forces that have reclaimed worlds lost during the Age of Strife have occasionally discovered Asuryani installations or artifacts that require delicate negotiation to resolve, while the increased Imperial presence in previously uncontested regions has limited the Craftworld's freedom of movement. The long-term consequences of these changes will likely depend on the ability of both species to maintain the informal cooperation that has characterized their relationship during recent centuries. The role of the Harlequins in facilitating communication between different Asuryani factions has become increasingly important as the galaxy has grown more chaotic and dangerous. The servants of Segorach possess unique access to the webway network that allows them to travel between Craftworlds and other Aeldari settlements despite the disruptions caused by the Great Rift and other warp phenomena. Their performances often contain coded messages that provide strategic intelligence or coordinate responses to emerging threats, though their symbolic nature requires sophisticated interpretation by the audiences who receive them. The increasing frequency of demon incursions throughout the galaxy has created new challenges for Asuryani forces, as their psychic nature makes them particularly vulnerable to the predations of warp entities, while simultaneously providing them with the tools necessary to combat such threats effectively. The Craftworld populations that face demon invasions must balance the need for psychic defense against the risk of attracting additional attention from chaos forces, their responses typically involving carefully coordinated efforts that minimize psychic emanations while maximizing the effectiveness of their banishment rituals. The technological exchanges that occur during temporary alliances between Asuryani and Imperial forces typically involve the sharing of tactical intelligence rather than actual equipment or manufacturing techniques, as both sides maintain strict controls over their most sensitive technologies. The Asuryani contributions to these partnerships usually focus on their superior understanding of chaos corruption and their ability to identify tainted individuals or objects that might compromise Imperial security. The Imperial forces provide information about enemy movements and capabilities that the Asuryani can use to coordinate their own operations more effectively. The evolution of Asuryani military doctrine during the 41st millennium reflects their adaptation to a galaxy that has become increasingly hostile to their survival, their traditional emphasis on avoiding conflict replaced by the recognition that active intervention has become necessary to prevent outcomes that would threaten their species' existence. The Craftworld commanders who implement these new strategies must balance the aggressive tactics required for effective intervention against the conservative principles that have preserved their civilization for 10 millennia, creating internal tensions that continue to influence their decision-making processes. The gradual decline of the Asuryani represents one of the most tragic aspects of the 41st millennium, as their once mighty civilization continues its inexorable slide toward extinction despite their desperate efforts to preserve their species and culture. The finite nature of Craftworld populations creates an impossible mathematical equation where every death represents an irreplaceable loss, while the constant warfare that defines the current age ensures that casualties mount faster than they can be replaced through natural reproduction. The Asuryani's extended lifespans, once a blessing that allowed for the accumulation of vast knowledge and experience, have become a curse that makes population recovery virtually impossible within any reasonable timeframe. The demographic crisis facing the Craftworlds extends beyond simple numbers to encompass the loss of specialized knowledge and skills that take centuries to master. When an experienced Farseer falls in battle, their accumulated wisdom and prophetic abilities disappear with them, leaving gaps in the Craftworld's strategic capabilities that cannot be filled by promoting less experienced individuals. The death of Master Bonesingers eliminates irreplaceable expertise in maintaining ancient technologies, while the loss of veteran exarchs weakens the aspect shrines that serve as the foundation of Craftworld military doctrine. Each casualty creates a ripple effect that diminishes the entire community's capacity to survive future challenges. The psychological impact of this decline affects every aspect of Asuryani society, as the constant awareness of their species' mortality creates an atmosphere of desperate urgency that influences every decision. The traditional long-term planning that characterized their ancestors has been replaced by increasingly short-term thinking focused on immediate survival rather than sustainable development. The Craftworld populations that once engaged in elaborate cultural projects spanning millennia now concentrate their efforts on military preparedness and crisis response, their artistic achievements reduced to functional necessities rather than expressions of aesthetic excellence. The strategic implications of population decline force Craftworld commanders to make increasingly difficult choices about resource allocation and risk management. Military operations that might have been routine during the height of their power now require careful consideration of whether the potential benefits justify the risk of irreplaceable casualties. The traditional Asuryani doctrine of achieving maximum effect through minimal force expenditure has evolved into an obsession with avoiding any engagement that might result in significant losses, even when such caution allows threats to grow beyond manageable proportions. The emergence of the Inari faction represents the most significant development in Asuryani civilization since the fall, offering a potential path to salvation that challenges fundamental assumptions about their species' fate. Ivrain's followers have embraced a radically different approach to survival, arguing that the awakening of Ennead provides the only realistic hope for breaking the cycle of decline that has defined their existence for 10 millennia. The theological revolution promoted by the Inari extends beyond simple religious reform to encompass a complete reimagining of what it means to be Asuryani in the current age. The process of awakening Ennead requires the voluntary sacrifice of Asuryani souls, a practice that creates profound moral dilemmas for individuals and communities already struggling with population decline. The Inari argue that these sacrifices serve a greater purpose by contributing to the birth of a god capable of challenging Slaanesh directly, potentially freeing their entire species from the threat of spiritual predation. The mathematical logic appears compelling. The sacrifice of thousands might save millions, while the alternative involves the gradual extinction of their entire civilization through attrition and predation. The resistance to Inari philosophy among traditional Craftworld populations reflects deep-seated cultural values that prioritize the preservation of existing communities over speculative future benefits. The conservative elements within Asuryani society argue that their species has survived for 10,000 years through careful preservation of their resources and traditions, making the radical changes proposed by the Inari both unnecessary and dangerous. The philosophical divide between these factions has created internal conflicts that threaten to tear apart the unity that has sustained Craftworld civilization through its darkest periods. The practical implications of Aeldari recruitment efforts have created measurable impacts on Craftworld populations, as some of their most skilled and experienced individuals have chosen to join the new movement. The departure of these volunteers represents a significant loss of human capital that weakens the Craftworld's ability to maintain their technological infrastructure and military capabilities. The irony that salvation might require the sacrifice of the very individuals whose skills are most essential for survival has not been lost on critics of the Aeldari philosophy. The Ungkarn's manifestations during critical battles have provided tangible evidence of Ennead's growing power, demonstrating capabilities that seem to validate Aeldari claims about their god's potential. The avatar of Ennead appears as a towering figure wreathed in spectral flames, its form shifting between the appearances of different Asuryani who have contributed their souls to the god's awakening. The entity's presence on the battlefield creates zones of supernatural terror that affect both allies and enemies, while its power over death and rebirth allows it to resurrect fallen warriors and drain the life force from enemy combatants. The strategic implications of the Ungkarn's abilities have forced military planners to reconsider their understanding of battlefield dynamics, as the entity's power to appear anywhere that Asuryani have died in significant numbers makes it an unpredictable but potentially decisive factor in major engagements. The Avatar's interventions typically occur during moments of greatest crisis, when traditional forces have been overwhelmed and defeat appears inevitable. The psychological impact of witnessing the dead return to fight alongside the living creates morale effects that can either inspire desperate courage or paralyze troops with existential terror. The theological debates surrounding Ennead's nature and purpose have revealed fundamental disagreements about the relationship between death and renewal within Asuryani philosophy. Traditional interpretations of their spiritual beliefs emphasize the importance of preserving the souls of the dead within the infinity circuits, where they can continue to contribute to their community's collective wisdom. The Aeldari challenge this framework by arguing that true renewal requires the willingness to sacrifice individual preservation for the greater good of species survival. The potential for uniting all Aeldari under the banner of Ennead represents perhaps the most ambitious aspect of Aeldari philosophy, as their vision encompasses not just the Craftworld Asuryani, but also their Drukhari cousins and the scattered Exodites who have maintained their primitive existence on distant worlds. The theological framework promoted by Ivrain's followers suggests that the artificial divisions between different Aeldari factions represent obstacles to their species' renewal rather than necessary adaptations to post-fall existence. The practical challenges of implementing such unity remain enormous, given the fundamental philosophical differences that separate these groups. The Drukhari's response to Aeldari recruitment efforts has been mixed, with some individuals embracing the promise of escape from their parasitic existence, while others reject any philosophy that requires the sacrifice of their carefully preserved immortality. The residents of Commora who have joined the Aeldari movement represent a tiny fraction of that realm's population, though their departure has created noticeable disruptions in the delicate balance of power that maintains the Dark City's stability. The Archons and other leaders who rule Commora's various factions view the Aeldari as a potentially existential threat to their authority and way of life. The Exodite worlds that have been contacted by Aeldari missionaries have generally proven resistant to their message, as these communities have developed their own solutions to the challenges of post-fall existence. The Exodites' symbiotic relationship with their world spirits and their rejection of advanced technology represent alternative approaches to survival that do not require the radical sacrifices demanded by Aeldari philosophy. The cultural isolation that has preserved these communities from outside influence also makes them suspicious of any movement that originates from the Craftworlds or Commora. The search for new solutions to the challenges facing Asuryani civilization has led to increased experimentation with their infinity circuits, as Craftworld populations explore ways to expand and enhance these spiritual networks. The traditional understanding of these systems emphasized their role as repositories for the souls of the dead, but recent research has revealed additional capabilities that might be exploited for the benefit of the living. The most promising developments involve techniques for temporarily transferring consciousness between living individuals and the circuit, allowing for the sharing of knowledge and experience in ways that transcend normal educational methods. The risks associated with infinity circuit experimentation include the possibility of permanent psychological damage to participants, as the process of interfacing with the collective consciousness of the dead can overwhelm individual identity. The spirit seers who oversee these experiments must maintain careful monitoring of all participants to prevent the kind of spiritual contamination that could compromise the circuit's integrity. The potential benefits of successful experimentation include the ability to preserve and transmit knowledge more efficiently, potentially slowing the loss of expertise that accompanies population decline. The technological applications of enhanced infinity circuit capabilities might include the development of new forms of wraith construct that incorporate the consciousness of living volunteers, rather than requiring the disturbance of the dead. These hybrid entities could potentially combine the supernatural capabilities of traditional wraith constructs with the flexibility and adaptability of living consciousness, creating warriors that surpass the limitations of both organic and artificial forms. The ethical implications of such developments remain hotly debated within Craftworld society, as they represent fundamental alterations to the nature of Asuryani existence. The potential resurrection of Aeldari gods represents another avenue of research that has attracted increasing attention from Craftworld scholars and theologians. The fragmented nature of Kain's essence suggests that divine consciousness might be reconstructed through the careful assembly of scattered components, while the imprisonment of Isha within Nurgle's garden creates the possibility of divine rescue missions that could restore another member of the ancient pantheon. The practical challenges of such endeavors remain enormous, as they would require coordinated efforts on a scale that the diminished Asuryani population might not be able to sustain. The search for Kain's fragments has led to archaeological expeditions throughout the galaxy, as Craftworld scholars attempt to locate and recover the scattered pieces of their war god's essence. The avatar statues that house these fragments represent the most obvious locations for such searches, though the process of extracting divine essence without destroying the host construct requires techniques that exceed current Asuryani capabilities. The theoretical possibility of reassembling Kain's complete consciousness has inspired research into advanced psychic manipulation techniques that might allow for the reconstruction of fragmented divine awareness. The liberation of Isha from Nurgle's garden represents an even more ambitious undertaking, as it would require direct confrontation with one of the most powerful chaos gods in his own domain. The strategic implications of such an operation extend far beyond the immediate goal of divine rescue, as success would demonstrate that the forces of chaos are not invincible, and that coordinated action by the younger races might achieve objectives that seemed impossible. The tactical challenges of penetrating Nurgle's realm and extracting a prisoner from his personal custody would require resources and capabilities that no single faction currently possesses. The potential for alliance with other races has become increasingly important, as the Asuryani recognize that their survival depends upon maintaining the balance of power that prevents any single faction from achieving total dominance. The informal cooperation that has characterized their relationship with the Imperium during recent centuries represents a model for similar arrangements with other species, though the xenophobic ideologies that dominate galactic politics create significant obstacles to formal alliance structures. The practical benefits of such cooperation include shared intelligence about common threats and coordinated responses to existential challenges that transcend species boundaries. The relationship between the Asuryani and the Tau Empire represents one of the most promising examples of interspecies cooperation, as both civilizations share philosophical commitments to technological advancement and rational governance that create common ground for collaboration. The Tau's relatively recent emergence as a galactic power means that they lack the historical prejudices that complicate relationships with older species, while their expansion into regions that contain ancient Aeldari ruins creates opportunities for mutually beneficial arrangements. The technological exchanges that have occurred during joint operations have provided both species with insights that enhance their military capabilities. The challenges facing potential Asuryani-Tau cooperation include fundamental differences in their approaches to psychic phenomena and their understanding of the warp's dangers. The Tau's limited psychic abilities make them largely immune to the spiritual threats that dominate Asuryani strategic thinking, while their materialist philosophy prevents them from fully understanding the existential challenges that shape Craftworld decision-making. The communication barriers created by these differences require careful management to prevent misunderstandings that could undermine otherwise productive relationships. The ultimate fate of the Asuryani remains uncertain, as their civilization stands at a crossroads between potential salvation and inevitable extinction. The traditional path of gradual decline and careful preservation might allow them to survive for several more millennia, though the mathematical realities of population loss suggest that such survival would ultimately prove temporary. The radical alternatives proposed by the Inari and other reformist movements offer the possibility of genuine renewal, though they require sacrifices that might destroy the very culture they seek to preserve. The scenario in which the Asuryani emerge as saviors of the galaxy depends upon their ability to unite their scattered factions and coordinate their efforts with other species in confronting the existential threats that face all sentient life. The awakening of Ennead, the resurrection of their ancient gods, and the formation of lasting alliances with younger races could potentially create a coalition capable of challenging the forces of chaos and preserving civilization for future generations. The prophetic traditions that have guided Asuryani decision-making for millennia suggest that such outcomes remain possible, though they require choices and sacrifices that test the limits of their species' commitment to survival. The alternative scenario involves the gradual extinction of Asuryani civilization as their populations continue to decline and their technological capabilities deteriorate beyond the point of recovery. The mathematical projections based on current casualty rates and reproduction patterns suggest that most craftworlds will become unsustainable within the next few millennia, their populations falling below the critical thresholds necessary for maintaining their complex technological infrastructure. The final remnants of their civilization might survive as scattered communities of refugees, their once mighty empire reduced to footnotes in the histories written by their successors. The legacy of the Asuryani will endure regardless of their ultimate fate, as their contributions to galactic civilization have established precedents and created knowledge that will influence future generations. Their mastery of psychic disciplines, their understanding of the warp's dangers, and their technological achievements represent permanent additions to the galaxy's accumulated wisdom. The younger races that inherit their territories and responsibilities will build upon foundations that the Asuryani established through 10 millennia of struggle and sacrifice. The current generation of Asuryani leaders faces decisions that will determine whether their species survives to see the 42nd millennium or becomes another casualty of the galaxy's endless conflicts. The choices they make regarding population preservation, technological development, and alliance formation will echo through the centuries, their consequences affecting not just their own people, but the entire balance of galactic civilization. The weight of this responsibility drives their desperate search for solutions that might break the cycle of decline and create sustainable paths toward renewal. The story of the Asuryani serves as both a cautionary tale about the dangers of excess and a testament to the resilience of civilizations that adapt to changing circumstances. Their transformation from the masters of the galaxy to its most endangered survivors demonstrates that even the mightiest empires can fall, while their continued existence proves that careful planning and disciplined sacrifice can preserve what matters most through the darkest of times. Whether they emerge as the galaxy's saviors or fade into history, as its most tragic victims, the Asuryani have already secured their place as one of the most remarkable civilizations ever to grace the stars.